Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Snoozy Scientist, where we drift through the wonders of science one sleepy yawn at a time. Tonight, we'll step into a question that has followed us since the beginning, a question that lingers quietly in every reflection, every glimpse of our own skin. When we look closely at the other creatures who share our world, the lions, the wolves, the apes, we see a common thread. Every one of them wears nature's ancient gift, a coat of fur, a shield of warmth, of camouflage, of safety. It's Mother Nature's way of saying that no creature should face the elements alone. And yet, among them all, we stand apart, exposed to sunlight and rain, to heat and cold, with nothing between our bodies and the world but our skin. We humans are the only large land mammal that walks the earth almost bare. Even our closest relative, the chimpanzees, who share about 98% of our DNA, remain covered in hair from head to toe. But we were not always so different. Hidden beneath our smooth skin are millions of quiet memories, hair follicles that once stood proud on the backs of our ancestors. Somewhere in our past, humanity did something no other creature dared. We let it go. We abandoned nature's armor, trading fur for sweat, shadow for firelight, and warmth for the strange and fragile power of being exposed. But why? Why would nature strip its most fragile animal of the one thing that could protect it? Was it heat, disease, attraction, or something far more profound? A step toward becoming self aware. Tonight, we'll follow these quiet questions through time, from the shaded forests where our ancestors still wore their fur to the open plains where they began to shed it. Because this isn't just a story about biology, it's a story about identity, about what we lost, what we gained, and what our nakedness still whispers about who we are. But before we begin, if you enjoy drifting off with slow, calm, and soothing science stories with no pressure to stay awake, then a like and a subscribe would mean the world. It helps this channel grow, and it helps others like you find their way here. And if you'd be so kind, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it there? I love seeing how far these quiet explorations travel. So now, take a deep breath, let your shoulders soften, and together, let's step softly back in time to the moment when our species shed its fur and began the long, naked journey toward becoming human. After the age of reptiles, when the great scaly giants ruled the warm and ancient earth, life began to change in quiet ways. The world cooled, nights grew longer, and the air carried a chill that slipped easily through thin skin. Small creatures began to burrow, hide, and curl into hollows to escape the cold. From that struggle for warmth, a new invention of nature began to take shape, one so simple and yet so powerful that it would redefine survival itself. Out of the old armor of scales came something soft, something alive, the first strands of hair. It began not with beauty, but with need. Underneath the plates and scales of their reptilian ancestors, tiny sensory cells started to awaken, detecting air, touch, and temperature. Over time, those cells drew the hard scales inward, forming flexible shafts that trapped air close to the skin. That air layer became a barrier, holding heat against fragile bodies during the cold nights. In those early moments of mammalian evolution, warmth meant survival, and hair became nature's answer to the chill of a changing planet. Each fine strand carried the memory of a scale, transformed from armor into insulation. These first mammals were small, often no larger than a modern mouse. They lived in shadows, in burrows, and beneath leaves, their world filled with predators that towered over them. For them, fur was more than comfort. It was camouflage, protection, and a quiet defense against a hostile earth. The soft coat allowed them to move silently in the night, blending with soil and bark. It let them curl up in sleep, conserving precious heat that scales could never hold. When danger approached, the fine hairs on their backs bristled with tension, an instinctive signal of fear long before sound or words existed. In time, this soft invention evolved into something more complex. Hair began to serve not only as insulation, but also as a living sensor. Tiny muscles at the base of each follicle allowed hairs to rise at the faintest disturbance, catching changes in wind or movement. Some evolved whiskers, vibrissae sensitive to the faintest vibration, able to feel what sight could not see. A creature could now sense its environment through touch, every hair a whispering thread connected to the brain. Evolution had turned skin into an organ of awareness, one that felt the world before it was even seen. The variety of fur across the growing family of mammals became a gallery of adaptation. In the frozen plains, thick coats trapped warmth as efficiently as a blanket of snow. The snow leopard wore a dense, pale fur that blurred it into the mountainside. In the forests, wolves developed layers of guard hairs and downy undercoats, perfect for shedding rain and wind. Even the bat, master of the night sky, carried a fine dusting of fur to guard against the chill of high air currents. Every strand served a purpose, shaped by the world it lived in. Nature sculpted fur with precision, color, length, and thickness, each responding to the demands of light, temperature, and terrain. Fur became language. Among many species, it carried emotion and signal. Raised hairs showed fear or anger. Flattened coats spoke of calm and submission. Some species evolved bright markings and seasonal coats, turning fur into a tool of attraction or deception. The white of an Arctic fox was not just camouflage, but communication with its frozen world, an unspoken harmony between body and landscape. In the jungle, stripes and spots broke outlines into shadows, hiding movement from watching eyes. Across millions of years, fur wove itself into the identity of mammals. It was not decoration, it was design. As the age of mammals rose from the ashes of the reptilian world, fur defined them more than any other trait. It allowed them to spread into every corner of Earth, from the icy poles to the deepest forests, from dry plains to damp caves. It kept their bodies warm, but it also gave them freedom. Warm-blooded life could now travel beyond the limits of the sun. No longer bound to the heat of the day, mammals could hunt in the cool of dusk, raise their young in dark burrows, and explore the night. Fur was the silent key that unlocked endurance. Even as intelligence began to rise among certain lineages, fur remained an essential companion. Early primates living in lush forests needed their coats as much as any other creature. Their thick fur protected them from biting insects, rain, and sudden drops in temperature as they leapt through the canopy. The dense hair on their limbs softened falls and shielded skin from scratches and sun. It was not a relic of the past, it was an advantage perfectly suited to life among leaves and branches. In those shaded green worlds, intelligence grew beneath a warm coat, mind and fur evolving side by side. At this point in Earth's story, fur was nothing less than perfection. It was a living technology, flexible, self-repairing, endlessly adaptable. Through it, mammals could survive the cold, feel the wind, and sense danger before it arrived. There was no flaw in the design, no reason for nature to undo what had worked so beautifully for millions of years. The soft mantle that covered each creature was proof of evolution's patience, the delicate balance between form and survival. For countless ages, it seemed immutable, a success written in every hair. Yet, as time moved forward and the world began to shift again, something unexpected stirred on the horizon of life. The perfection of fur, once unchallenged, would meet a force that changed everything, not through strength, but through the slow unfolding of circumstance. In that still moment, as the forest shimmered with the breath of evening, and the first primates groomed their coats beneath the trees, nature stood on the edge of its next great transformation. The story of warmth, protection, and sensation was about to give way to something new, the quiet beginning of change. Under magnification, the skin tells a clear fact. Humans have nearly the same number of follicles as chimpanzees, but the hairs they produce are thinner and shorter. In other words, hair quantity is similar, visibility changed. The difference is not in how many follicles exist, but in how each follicle produces a strand. Among the branches of the forest, life once mirrored itself in familiar shapes: long arms, keen eyes, and faces framed with dark hair. The great apes, our living cousins, still carry the echoes of that ancient design. Their coats gleam under scattered sunlight, thick and coarse, forming a shield between skin and sky. Every strand serves a role, catching moisture, softening blows, and blending into the shifting canopy. To look at them is to glimpse the form that nature once perfected for life in the trees. Chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans stand as living pages of that same story, each adapted to their own world. The chimpanzee's coat is thin and wiry, shaped for heat and shade beneath the African sun. Gorillas wear heavier fur, dense and deep, guarding against the chill of mountain fog. Orangutans, their long copper hair swaying in the damp air, move through dripping leaves and endless rain. From afar, the difference between them and us seems vast. Yet when a single patch of human skin is magnified, the surprise appears in plain sight. Follicles lie everywhere, evenly spaced, just as they do on a chimpanzee's body. They are smaller, finer, and close to invisible, but they remain quiet traces of what once grew thick and full. At this level of detail, hair becomes less a covering and more a constellation of living points, each rooted in the same deep biology that binds every mammal together. The difference lies in thickness and light. Where a chimpanzee's follicle produces a dark, stiff fiber, ours forms a translucent thread. Under sunlight, human skin glows, reflecting smoothness instead of shadow. This illusion of nakedness defines us. It is not the lack of hair, but the way light plays across exposed skin that marks the change. In primates, visibility shapes perception. When hairs grow finer, the skin beneath begins to speak. Light reveals every shift of color and warmth. A blush, a flush, or a faint trace of goosebumps appear as living messages, signals once hidden beneath a coat. These small changes whisper the beginning of new communication between body and world. Hair, in its countless forms, remains one of nature's most adaptable designs. It thickens in cold, thins in heat, grows in new directions, or fades when no longer needed. Evolution does not discard what works. It alters texture, purpose, and scale. The human pattern of follicles is ancient, carried unchanged from our shared ancestors, yet rewritten in its expression. The machinery remains, only tuned differently. Among gorillas, fur signals power and maturity. The silver streak on an elder's back declares strength and age. In orangutans, the flowing hair is both protection and identity, a curtain of color that blends with the filtered light of their forests. For chimpanzees, grooming is language. Each stroke through another's hair is a quiet bond, a reaffirmation of trust. Hair carries more than warmth, it carries relationship. Against this living backdrop, the human form begins to drift toward change. The follicles endure, but their output softens. The structure beneath our skin is not erased but adjusted, waiting for new uses and new expressions. Beneath every pore lies continuity, a thread linking us to the forest and the creatures that still wear its design. What appears as loss is often refinement. The evolution of hair shows how nature edits rather than deletes. The same follicle that once wove thick fur now shapes delicate threads that let heat escape, colors shine, and emotions surface. In the texture of our skin lies the story of what remained and what was transformed. Seen this way, human hairlessness is not an ending, but a stage in motion. It began quietly, long before upright steps carried our ancestors beyond the forest shade. In every fine strand left behind, the past and the future meet, bound by a pattern that never truly vanished, only learned to hide in light. The world 2 million years ago was changing. Where deep forests once stretched in unbroken green, the land began to open. Trees thinned, shadows grew scarce, and the horizon widened into waves of golden grass. The air shimmered under a relentless sign, and the wind carried the scent of dry earth and distance. Across these new plains of Africa, life was being rewritten. The rhythm of survival would no longer belong to the canopy or the shade. It would belong to the open, to those who could endure the heat and the light. Early Homo erectus emerged into this world of exposure. They were still creatures of instinct and adaptation, shaped by necessity rather than intention. The forest had once wrapped them in cool protection, its shadows a refuge where fur and moisture kept the body safe. But in the new savannas, the rules had shifted. The air was heavy, the sun unrelenting, and the ground stretched endlessly without cover. To live here meant learning to move under the open sky, to trade the safety of leaves for the risk of light. Imagine one of them stepping from the fringe of trees, the soft soil giving way to the dry dust of the plain. Around them, the horizon trembled in heat, a living mirage that blurred the edges of the world. The cries of insects filled the air, and the scent of sun-baked grass rose from the earth. With every step, the body absorbed light and warmth. Their once useful coat, once a shield in the damp forest, now trapped heat like a heavy blanket. The sun did not relent, and neither could they. The only way forward was to change. Standing upright, a gift inherited from generations before, offered both freedom and burden. It allowed their eyes to scan vast distances for predators and prey, yet it also meant that the body, now stretched toward the sky, faced the full intensity of midday heat. The shoulders, chest, and back, once shaded under leaves, now became landscapes of exposure. Every patch of fur that caught the light became a pocket of heat. Beneath that warmth, the body's systems were being tested. To survive, the balance between cooling and overheating would have to find a new harmony. The savanna was not a forgiving teacher. Days stretched long, and shade was rare. When the wind stopped, the air stood still, pressing down with invisible weight. Each movement became a negotiation with the heat. Those who lingered in the sun too long risked exhaustion. Those who moved with timing and patience, resting when needed and walking when the ground cooled, found the rhythm that allowed survival. Nature, patient and unsentimental, favored those who could adapt to its rhythm. The open plains also changed the way these early humans lived. No longer could they rely on silence or stillness to hide. They had to move, often and far, chasing herds that drifted between watering holes, searching for roots, berries, or the remnants left by other predators. Every journey meant hours under the open sky. Over generations, the body began to change, quietly and efficiently. Those with less dense coats shed heat faster. Those with skin more exposed could endure the long hours of pursuit and survival. Little by little, the forest's warmth gave way to the sun's intensity, and fur, once a sign of strength, became a burden. The change was not sudden, it unfolded across thousands of years, carried by the slow, steady hand of evolution. Mothers passed their genes to children, who would inherit lighter, finer hair. Bodies adjusted to radiate heat more effectively. The shape of life itself began to shift in response to this endless summer. Each generation carried traces of what came before, but beneath their skin, something new was being written, a blueprint for endurance under the burning sky. There must have been moments of quiet struggle, the air shimmering, the sound of heartbeats mixing with the buzz of life, the feel of hot wind against exposed skin. The forest edge grew more distant with every passing season. To survive in the open meant facing vulnerability, to predators, to the elements, to the sun itself. Yet it also meant seeing farther, covering more ground, and mastering the vastness of this new world. In these endless plains, a subtle but powerful transformation was underway. The body was learning to live in the light, where once fur protected, now the skin began to take on the work, a surface capable of releasing heat, of enduring what the forest had never demanded. It was not a leap, but a quiet step, one small adjustment leading to the next, until a new form of survival began to emerge. The sun became both adversary and ally. It tested every creature that dared to walk beneath it, but it also offered vision, clarity, and possibility. In this unforgiving light, early humans began to find a strange advantage. Their upright stance lifted them above the worst of the heat radiating from the ground, while the winds that moved across the plains cooled their bodies more effectively than the furred animals around them. Step by step, they learned to move with purpose under the sky's glare, their pace steady, their gaze forward. This was the moment when the shape of humanity began to turn, not through conscious design, but through necessity. The world had changed, and so did they. The savannas stretched in every direction, golden and alive, a testing ground for endurance and adaptation. In that long exposure, life rewrote itself. The forest's children had stepped into the sun, and though they did not yet know it, the path toward becoming the naked ape had begun, quietly, inevitably, and with the slow certainty of time. The sun ruled the open plains. Its light burned across endless grasslands, pressing down on the ground until heat shimmered in waves. For most creatures, midday meant retreat. The lions rested in the shade of sparse acacia trees. Antelope stood still beneath the few shadows they could find, and even the insects seemed to hum more softly in the heavy air. Yet among them moved a strange kind of animal that did not hide. It walked, steady and relentless, beneath the same sun that drove others to stillness. To live under such light required more than courage. It required a body that could master heat itself. Fur, once the perfect armor for cold nights and forest shade, now became a trap. The same insulation that had saved mammals from freezing now held too much warmth inside. Under a blazing sun, fur acted like a blanket that could not be removed. Heat built up beneath it, wrapping the body in its own rising temperature. Every movement made the air feel heavier, and every breath carried the weight of warmth that had nowhere to go. Bare skin offered a new solution. It allowed heat to escape freely into the air. When sunlight struck the surface, it could warm and cool again without trapping that energy inside. The difference was simple, almost invisible, but it changed everything. Without thick fur, the wind could glide across the skin, lifting away warmth and drying the thin film of moisture that clung to the surface. The body learned to release heat instead of holding it, turning exposure into an advantage. In the open plains of Africa, survival was measured not by strength alone, but by endurance. Many of the great predators hunted in bursts. Lions, leopards, and cheetahs could chase swiftly, but only for moments. When the heat rose, they stopped. Their thick coats, built for dawn and dusk, became burdens in the sun's full glare. But early humans, with lighter coverings and upright posture, discovered a different rhythm. They could move when others could not. Imagine a herd of antelope grazing under the morning light. The air begins to warm, and the herd stirs toward shade. Behind them, small figures move steadily across the grass, silent and persistent. The chase does not begin with a sprint, but with a slow pursuit. The prey runs, then pauses to cool itself, while the hunters keep walking. Over hours, the balance shifts. The antelope's body, trapped in its fur, overheats, muscles cramp, breathing grows frantic. The human body, cooler and slower, endures. The chase may last half a day until the animal can no longer move. The hunter, breathing evenly, closes the distance. This form of hunting, known as persistence hunting, was not a battle of speed, but of patience. The strength was in steady motion, in the ability to keep moving through heat that would exhaust almost any other creature. Bare skin, long legs, and rhythm turned the unbearable into survival. It was not a weapon of claws or fangs, but a weapon of time. In this quiet endurance, a new kind of power appeared. The body learned to balance between heat and movement, keeping its core temperature steady while everything around it baked. The skin, once a surface of protection, became an instrument of control. Every heartbeat, every step was a calculation between energy spent and heat released. The sun that punished others became the backdrop for a remarkable advantage, one born not from might, but from adaptation. Being bare meant being vulnerable, yet it also meant freedom. Without fur, the body could cool faster, run farther, and work longer. Beneath the bright sky, the wind became an ally, sweeping across the skin and carrying away heat. Even the shape of the body began to change to fit this new relationship with the sun. Longer limbs, narrow frames, and upright posture reduced the area that absorbed sunlight and increased the surface that released heat. Evolution was sculpting a form made for movement, not comfort. Somewhere within this transformation, the line between weakness and brilliance began to blur. What looked like loss, the absence of fur, the exposure of skin, was in truth an innovation. Nature had traded insulation for endurance. It had stripped away protection to make room for power of another kind. The animal that once sought shade now carried its own solution to the sun's challenge. In the long arc of time, this shift reshaped not only how early humans survived, but how they lived. Days were no longer divided strictly by heat and darkness. They could hunt under the same sun that silenced their predators. They could cross vast distances in search of food and water, guided by endurance instead of luck. Their bare skin became a mark of specialization, the quiet signature of a species built for persistence. The heat that once threatened life now became a partner in evolution's design. The air shimmered, the grass swayed, and the early humans continued their long walk beneath the burning sky. Their skin glowed with effort, their breath steady, their pace unbroken. Each step was both survival and transformation, the living proof that adaptation was not always about strength or speed. Sometimes it was about outlasting the sun itself. And so, under that ancient light, the story of endurance began to unfold. The forest was behind them, the open plains ahead, and the sun watched from above as the shape of humanity took form, quiet, steady, and unafraid of the heat. The air of ancient Africa was thick and humming with life. Insects filled every space between shadow and sunlight. They crawled through fur, floated on the wind, and clung to skin with quiet determination. Every creature, from the smallest rodent to the largest primate, carried passengers upon its body, tiny survivors feeding on blood and warmth. For millions of years, this was the balance of nature. The same fur that guarded life from cold and sun also became a haven for those that fed upon it. For the ancestors of early humans, living in tropical regions meant sharing every day with these persistent companions. Fleas hid between hairs, ticks burrowed beneath the skin, and lice built entire worlds within the dense landscape of fur. Each bite sparked irritation, a reminder that warmth came at a cost. In humid air where sweat lingered, fur became a living terrain of movement. To scratch was not a habit, but a survival act, a daily ritual against an invisible swarm. In this hidden conflict, the parasites often held the advantage. Small, numerous, and relentless, they returned faster than they could be removed. Carried by grass or passing animals, ticks latched onto the warmest folds of flesh, behind the ears, under the limbs, along the neck. Lice bred in tight spaces, their generations turning over in weeks, creating an unending cycle of infestation. Every mammal with a coat became not only an individual, but an ecosystem, its surface a field of competing lives. Over countless ages, a subtle shift began to take hold. In the warm African climate, the cost of these companions grew higher than the comfort of fur itself. Individuals with slightly thinner coats found an unspoken advantage. Fewer hairs meant fewer hiding places for lice and ticks, fewer infections, fewer fevers. With less irritation came more time to rest, to hunt, and to raise young. Slowly, imperceptibly, the advantage spread through the generations. Genetic studies of lice hint at timing. The divergence between human head lice and pubic lice suggests shifts in body hair patterns millions of years ago. This change looks like a biological response to a cause such as dense hair favoring parasites. Molecular estimates suggest about 3 million years in the past. The lice that once lived across the entire body were forced to specialize. One lineage retreated to the scalp, where fine hair still grew thick enough to shelter it. Another took refuge in the coarser regions below the waist. These parasites became unintentional witnesses to transformation. Their DNA holds the record of one of the most profound evolutionary edits in our lineage, where bones preserve structure, lice preserve habit, and their survival tells when the body first began to open to air and light. What was once a private discomfort now stands as evidence of a larger shift, written in miniature within the genes of a blood-feeding insect. The loss of fur did not come all at once. It rippled through time, one generation after another, each born with a little less for parasites to cling to. The smooth skin that emerged was not merely the result of change, but the product of endurance. Those who carried fewer irritations lived longer, healthier lives. Over many ages, irritation shaped anatomy. The body that once offered refuge became an inhospitable plain, bare yet strong. Still, the cost of this new freedom was clear. Without fur, the skin met the world directly. Insects still bit, but their touch was sharper now. The sun pressed harder, and the chill of evening crept closer to bone. The body stood naked before the elements, exposed but alert, carrying within it the memory of what had been shed. In this new form, balance had to be found again. Across the savannas, the first nearly hairless bodies glistened in the heat. The constant crawling that had plagued earlier ancestors had quieted, replaced by the shimmer of sweat and the open touch of wind. The exchange was complete. Nature had chosen exposure over concealment, efficiency over burden. The surface of the body had become an instrument of adaptation, not a trap for parasites, but a frontier for something new. Yet removing that burden did not solve every problem. The world presented fresh hazards, and for those the species turned to another kind of solution. Long before cities, before metal tools or carved words, the world was ruled by cold and darkness. Night came quickly over the open plains, swallowing the horizon and filling the air with the cries of unseen predators. For the first humans, each sunset marked a return to danger. Without the thick coats that had once guarded their ancestors, they relied on one another and on the fragile warmth of shared bodies. Then, around 1 million years ago, something began to flicker against that darkness. a light that would change the rhythm of life forever. Fire was not invented, it was discovered, fragile and alive, drawn from the lightning that split trees and scorched grass. The first humans must have watched it from a distance, wary and still, seeing how animals fled from its reach. The air smelled of resin and smoke. The light trembled on their faces like a new dawn that would not fade. Curiosity slowly overcame fear. A branch still glowing after a storm became a thing to protect, to feed, to understand. From that moment, control began. The taming of fire marked the first great bond between humankind and the elements. Flames were gathered in hollows of stone, shielded from wind, tended through night and morning. Warmth spread outward, touching skin that had once shivered in the dark. The body eased in its glow. These first campfires were not only heat, but boundaries drawn against the wild. Around them, air thickened with safety and sound. For the first time, night could be endured, watched and shaped. Archaeology shows repeated concentrations of ash, charred bone, and stones reddened by heat. These hearths are the first durable evidence that hominins could gather warmth in place of a natural coat. Fire's light and heat gave immediate shelter to bare skin and a new social space for the group to gather. In layers of ancient earth, traces of these beginnings remain. At Kubifora in Kenya, burned clay lies in thin sheets among tools, darkened by smoke. In South Africa, stones blackened by many fires mark the spots where generations return to feed and rest. Each remnant carries the memory of care, of hands that added twigs, of eyes that waited for sparks to rise. The gift of flame extended beyond warmth. Light stretched the hours of awareness. Shadows moved on, cave walls, and faces glowed in shifting color. The sound of burning wood mingled with soft voices, language beginning to take shape beside the embers. Night was no longer absolute. The mind could stay awake, wandering into thought, into plans, into stories yet unspoken. The protection of fire changed the boundaries of fear. Predators, drawn close by scent, now lingered at the edges of the glow, eyes reflecting, uncertain. Smoke masked the smell of prey, confusing the hunt. Sparks drifted upward like messengers of safety. Within that circle of light, the cold retreated, and something deeper settled in its place, a quiet endurance that the dark could not erase. Over time, fire became more than survival. It softened food, making it richer and easier to digest. It hardened wood, shaped stone, and forged the beginnings of craft. Each use expanded what life could hold. Strength no longer depended on the body alone, but on the patience to tend flame. The hearth became the first gathering place. Around it, movement slowed, hands worked, eyes met, stories began to form in the rhythm of heat and breath. The sound of crackling branches filled the pauses between words. Here thought deepened, nurtured by warmth and light. The flame itself remained simple, a heartbeat of energy taken from the world and given form. It answered the cold not with fur, but with light that could be carried, shared, and renewed. The body, once bound to the elements, had found a companion in the very forces that once threatened it. In that soft orange glow, the line between nature and invention blurred. Fire had no shape, yet it shaped everything. The first humans sat before it, faces calm and silent, unaware that the warmth reaching their skin had become more than comfort. It had become the rhythm of life, steady as breath, fragile as flame, and lasting as memory. At the level of cells and ducts, humans changed. Eccrine sweat glands cover most of the body and excrete mostly water. Eccrine glands cluster at hair-bearing zones, producing richer secretions. Humans possess many more eccrine glands than other primates, so evaporation became a body-wide cooling method. This gland arrangement made long, sustained activity under heat feasible, and so enabled endurance strategies in hunting and travel. The human body carries within it a secret engine, one that works silently, invisible yet relentless. It glistens across the skin in the shimmer of effort and heat. Long before machines and tools, before words and firelight, this engine kept humanity alive beneath a punishing sun. It is built not from metal or gears, but from the smallest openings in the skin, millions of tiny doors that release warmth into the air. Sweat, simple and unremarkable, became the quiet machinery of endurance. Hidden beneath the skin, these glands follow two designs. The eccrine glands, the body's tireless workers, lie just under the surface, coiled and ready to release clear, cooling moisture. When heat builds, they open and spill out water that carries warmth away as it evaporates. The apocrine glands, deeper and fewer, release a thicker fluid, rich with scent and chemical signals, an echo of ancient communication between individuals. In most mammals, apocrine glands dominate, serving for scent and insulation. In humans, it was the eccrine network that took command, spreading across almost every inch of skin. Humans possess roughly 2 to 5 million eccrine glands, distributed across the palms, soles, scalp, chest, and back. Other mammals use far fewer. A horse cools only along specific muscles. A dog relies on panting, but the human body became a seamless cooling field. Each pore works like a tiny vent, part of a larger living surface designed for endurance. On the open plains of ancient Africa, this difference changed everything. When forests thinned and the climate turned dry, those who could shed heat fastest survived the longest. While furred predators rested under shade, early humans could keep moving. The air shimmered, the ground burned underfoot, and yet the body, drenched in sweat, carried on. This ability reshaped how humans interacted with the world. It made possible a new kind of hunting, one that relied not on speed, but on persistence. A hunter could follow prey for hours, tracking by footprint and shadow. The animal trapped in its coat of fur, overheated long before the human did. Step by step, breath by breath, the hunter closed the distance until exhaustion did the work that weapons could not. Each droplet of sweat came at a cost. Water and salt drained from the body, demanding replacement. Under the African sun, dehydration shadowed every pursuit. Those who learned to read thirst, to find rivers and shaded ground, endured. Those who could not, faded. The body became a living equation, balancing fluid and salt against distance and time. Over generations, the system refined itself. The skin, exposed and vulnerable, darkened with melanin to guard against radiation. The sweat glands multiplied, adapting to new levels of demand. The heart and lungs learned to cooperate with the glands, sending blood toward the surface where evaporation worked best. Evolution built a rhythm of survival measured in pulse and breath. The sensation of sweat remains one of the most ancient signatures of human life. It gathers along the temples, slides down the spine, and leaves a faint salt upon the lips. It marks effort, persistence, and the body's harmony with the air around it. Each droplet carries the memory of long hunts and long days, of ancestors who learned not to flee the heat, but to live within it. Through the endless exchange between heat and water, this hidden system sustained the species. Beneath every step and every breath, it still runs, quiet and faithful. When the sun presses hardest and the air seems to hold still, the human body answers with its soft shimmer, releasing warmth to the wind. Across that thin film of moisture, the balance continues, and life, as it has for millions of years, endures. In the soft light of the ancient world, the human body began to take on a new kind of language. Beneath the sun, the smooth surface of skin caught the light differently than fur ever had. It glowed, reflecting not only warmth but vitality. The bare body became more than a tool for survival. It became a silent signal, carrying messages that the eyes of others could read long before words were born. In the shimmer of sunlight and the pale glow of moonlight, skin revealed something deeper: health, youth, and life itself. Across the open plains and forest edges, the sheen of human skin stood out among the creatures that shared the land. The glint of light on moving limbs was not camouflage, but perhaps that no longer mattered. Survival had begun to depend on more than hiding or chasing. Within early human groups, another form of selection was taking shape, not through teeth or claws, but through sight and instinct. The skin became a kind of mirror, showing the story of the body beneath it, the even color of good health, the subtle flush of warmth and blood, the soft texture of youth. In every living system, signals matter. Birds flash bright feathers, fish shimmer in the water, and mammals show strength through posture and scent. Humans, stripped of fur, gained an entirely new surface for signaling. The exposed skin carried visible information that could not be hidden. Illness could pale it, hunger could thin it, joy or fear could alter its color in an instant. A healthy body, well fed and strong, glowed with vitality that others could see. Smoothness, tone, and the gentle reflection of light became an unconscious code, one that may have guided attraction and choice long before language or ritual existed. Sexual selection, quiet but persistent, works not through necessity but preference. Over countless generations, the eyes of one human chose the skin of another, drawn perhaps to softness, brightness, or the visible rhythm of health. In this way, beauty was not invented, it was inherited, refined by choice after choice, gaze after gaze. A face unhidden by fur revealed every detail of expression, every flicker of emotion. The body, too, became open to interpretation: the curve of muscle, the pattern of movement, the smoothness that hinted at youth and strength. These signals were small, almost invisible in their origin, yet powerful enough to shape what we became. The early human form, more exposed than any other primate, carried its history on its surface. Without fur, the subtle hues of melanin took on new importance, protecting the body while still allowing color to speak. The skin of every region adapted to its sunlight, but the language of beauty endured. Across generations, it remained tied to health, symmetry, and fertility, signs that life could continue through another. Even when tools, clothing, and shelter began to separate the human from the raw elements of nature, this visual code persisted, written in the glow of skin and the way it caught the light. Anthropologists have found that, across cultures and across time, beauty always circles back to visibility. The way skin catches warmth, the smoothness that signals care and youth, the quiet balance between protection and fragility. These patterns appear again and again in ancient sculptures carved from stone, in cave paintings, and in early fertility figures. The same details repeat: polished curves, luminous flesh, the suggestion of life beneath the surface. The earliest artists seemed to understand instinctively what evolution had long been shaping: that skin, bare and visible, was the canvas of human identity. Even as societies grew and differences widened, the fascination with skin never faded. Some cultures celebrated it with paint or pigment, others covered it with fabric or metal, but always it remained central to how people saw one another. A smooth face, clear eyes, and unblemished skin told stories of vitality, luck, and youth. Beneath all these interpretations lay a quiet biological truth. Visibility itself had become part of the species' communication. The naked skin was not only a result of evolution, it was a new instrument through which life expressed itself. There was also something intimate in this transformation. To touch bare skin was to cross the smallest distance between two lives. Without fur as a barrier, contact became direct, warm against warm, heartbeat against heartbeat. It is possible that the same exposure that made humans more visible also deepened connection. The skin carried both vulnerability and trust, making closeness a physical exchange rather than a gesture. A touch could soothe, comfort, or invite without a single word. Some scientists suggest that attraction and affection may have worked hand in hand to refine the body further. The individuals who found comfort in contact, who stayed close, who cared for one another's warmth and safety, may have passed on both the habit and the biology that made it easier. Smooth, sensitive skin, rich with nerves and responsive to touch, may have been shaped as much by love as by survival. The line between necessity and emotion began to blur, and the body itself became part of that balance. In this way, the evolution of human appearance was not simply a matter of chance or adaptation to heat. It was also the quiet unfolding of attraction, the shaping of a body meant not only to endure, but to connect. Each bare surface carried information, each reflection of light told a story, each glance between two early humans contained a spark of recognition, something wordless yet profound. And perhaps within that wordless recognition, something new began to grow. The same eyes that sought health and vitality began to linger, not from instinct alone, but from curiosity, from familiarity, from the strange comfort of another's presence. What started as a visual signal of life became something deeper, the beginning of empathy, of affection, of the long human bond that would one day be called love. When the fur was gone, the sun became both a giver and a threat. It poured over the open plains, filling every horizon with heat and brilliance. For early humans who now carried bare skin into the light, its warmth was no longer just comfort. It could burn, blind, and slowly unravel what life depended on. Beneath that golden sky, ultraviolet rays, unseen and silent, began to reach deep into the exposed layers of tissue. They broke the fragile chains of DNA, damaged cells, and drained the body of a vital molecule, folate, the nutrient that built new life. In this unrelenting light, the skin itself had to learn to defend. Nature, patient and precise, began to weave its answer within the smallest of cells. Deep in the basal layer of the skin, a new guardian emerged, the melanocyte. Each one, tiny and tireless, produced a pigment called melanin. This pigment gathered around the nuclei of skin cells like a soft umbrella, absorbing the ultraviolet energy that once cut into their genetic code. The process was quiet but powerful. Every particle of melanin captured light, converted it into harmless heat, and in doing so, turned the skin into a living shield. Melanin was not a single color, but a range from the deepest brown to the palest amber. Its production followed the rhythm of the environment. Where the sunlight was fierce and constant, the skin grew darker, packed with pigment that guarded the body's delicate inner machinery. Where the light was gentler and the air cooler, the skin grew lighter, allowing enough sunlight to pass through for the body to make vitamin D, which bones and immune systems depended upon. Over thousands of generations, these changes carved a spectrum across humanity, one that mirrored the shape of the planet itself. The connection between sunlight and skin tone was written across geography like a map. Near the equator, where the sun's rays fell most directly, deep pigmentation was not just protection, but preservation. It kept the body safe from ultraviolet damage, from burns, from the slow loss of nutrients essential for fertility and growth. As human populations began to move away from those latitudes, northward into cooler, dimmer regions, the balance shifted. There, lighter skin became an advantage, allowing more sunlight to penetrate and stimulate the production of vitamin D in the blood. Each shade carried a story of distance and adaptation. In places like East Africa, Melanin formed dense and even layers that absorbed light almost completely, a perfect defense for life under a vertical sun. Across the Mediterranean, where the seasons turned and the light softened, a gradient began to appear, skin that tanned with exposure, responding flexibly to changing skies. In the far north, under clouds and long winters, skin lightened further, preserving the fragile chemistry that sunlight powered. The colors of humanity were not separate, but continuous, flowing like the tides of migration that shaped them. At the microscopic level, the process unfolded like art in motion. Melanocytes, shaped like tiny branching trees, sent out extensions that delivered pigment to neighboring skin cells. Each cell received its share of protection, wrapping itself in layers of brown or golden melanin. When the sun grew stronger, these melanocytes worked harder, triggered by ultraviolet light itself, a self regulating system born from exposure. The more intense the sunlight, the deeper the defense became, and when the light faded, the skin returned to calm, its hue softening again. This was not a passive change, it was the skin thinking in color, solving problems in silence. Every tone reflected not preference or beauty, but physics, biology, and survival. It was a record of the Earth's light, written on the surface of its most adaptable creature. Even within a single population, the skin told of subtle differences. Genetics, climate, and even altitude shaped how melanin behaved. In high mountain regions, the thinner atmosphere let in more ultraviolet radiation, and people living there developed deeper pigments despite cooler air. Along coasts where sunlight reflected off the sea, the shimmer of light sculpted its own gradients. No two landscapes wrote the same pattern, yet every one followed the same rule: balance. Enough protection to preserve, enough light to sustain. When humans began to move across continents, their skin carried these ancestral maps with them. Over millennia, migration and mingling blended the tones again, just as rivers merge into one sea. The variety that covers humanity today is not random nor divided, but a reflection of the earth itself, a record of how far each lineage has traveled beneath the changing sky. From above, if one could look at the planet not by borders, but by color, it would appear like a great gradient of light and shadow, dark tones tracing the equator, fading gradually toward the poles, blending in bands that mirror the sweep of sunlight across the world. The pattern is not of difference, but of adaptation, the body finding harmony with the light that sustains it. The Melanin Shield was one of nature's quiet masterpieces. It turned vulnerability into strength, exposure into resilience. Beneath its surface, the human story continued, shaped by the same sun that once threatened to destroy it. The skin, once bare and fragile, had learned to fight back, not through armor or fur, but through color, through chemistry, through the simple brilliance of evolution, working in silence beneath the light. And when the sun sets on any corner of the world, all its shades fade to the same softness. The light disappears, and the map it paints across the skin rests once again in shadow, one species, wrapped in the memory of its long conversation with the sun. When fur disappeared and bare skin met the open air, something deeper began to unfold beneath the surface. The body, once shielded by hair, became a landscape of sensation. The skin, now exposed, turned into a living field of nerves that felt the world in ways no creature had ever known. Every breeze, every drop of rain, every brush of another body became information, meaning, connection. In the silence of evolution, touch had learned to speak. Within the thin layers of human skin lies a forest of nerve endings, billions of tiny sensors woven together like threads of light. Each one waits for contact, for the gentle pressure of another surface, for the trace of movement or warmth. These nerves are not evenly scattered. They gather densely in the fingertips, the lips, the face, the parts that explore, nurture, and express. The hands, especially, became instruments of understanding, capable of reading texture, temperature, and vibration with breathtaking precision. They could distinguish the grain of stone, the softness of grass, the pulse beneath another's skin. Through this new sensitivity, the human body began to perceive not just survival, but relationship. The shift from fur to skin opened a new kind of communication, one that relied on touch rather than sight or sound. Where fur once dulled sensation, bare skin amplified it. A touch could now mean reassurance, curiosity, or warning. The brush of an arm, the grip of a hand, the warmth shared between bodies in the cold, each gesture carried messages that words would one day struggle to match. Before language, before symbols or stories, there was this contact, the first and oldest form of understanding. Touch shaped the rhythm of life long before thought did. In early humans, the closeness between parents and children was vital. An infant's skin, soft and fragile, sought warmth and pressure instinctively. The heartbeat of a mother, the gentle rocking of her body, and the steady rhythm of her breath created a sense of safety deeper than any sound. The warmth of skin against skin regulated a newborn's temperature, slowed its heartbeat, and stilled its cries. In that exchange of warmth and calm, the infant's body learned what comfort was, and perhaps what love meant. Even in adulthood, this connection never truly faded. A hand on a shoulder, a palm resting against another, a shared embrace. These gestures built trust and cooperation in ways invisible yet essential. Groups that touched, that comforted and cared through physical contact, bonded more tightly. Their members stayed close, protected one another, and raised children more successfully. Through this quiet mechanism, touch became the foundation of empathy, linking biology to emotion in a way no other sense could. Underneath the surface, the science of it is intricate yet tender. The skin's sensory cells, mechanoreceptors, thermoreceptors, nociceptors, send signals through fine threads of nerve fiber to the brain. But what returns from the brain is not simply data, it is feeling. A gentle stroke can release oxytocin, a hormone that softens the body's edges, easing fear and deepening trust. These microscopic exchanges build invisible bridges between bodies, reinforcing bonds that have guided human communities for millions of years. Touch also became memory. The body learned to store the warmth of others, like echoes. The hand that once held another's leaves, a trace of calm that lingers long after contact ends. In the earliest shelters, when night brought cold and uncertainty, people gathered close, their bare skin sharing heat and quiet communion. The sound of breathing, the press of shoulders, the mingled warmth of bodies, all these small acts wove emotional threads that strengthened their survival. Touch was not luxury, it was necessity. Even beyond survival, touch gave rise to something unspoken, yet powerful, compassion. It allowed humans to comfort one another without words, to share grief, joy, or fear through contact alone. Where language can falter, the hand never does. To reach out, to hold, to embrace became the universal gesture that transcended distance and difference. The same skin that once fought the sun and the wind now became a bridge between minds. Through this skin, the human world expanded inward. A creature that once lived by instinct began to sense the presence of others, not just as companions or rivals, but as extensions of its own existence. The warmth of touch blurred the boundaries between self and other. A parent holding a child, a friend holding another's arm, a partner tracing the lines of another's face. All of these moments carried the same truth. Connection was not only emotional, it was physical, and it lived in the skin. Fur had once muffled this conversation, softening the edges of feeling, keeping the world at a distance. When it disappeared, the dialogue between life and touch grew louder, clearer, more intricate. The bare skin turned the act of contact into communication, transforming simple pressure into meaning. Through it, humans learned cooperation, intimacy, and the ability to feel not only their own experience, but that of another. Even now, touch remains the first language and the last. Before the newborn opens its eyes, it knows the world through the warmth of a hand. In the final moments of life, when words fade, touch is what remains, the reassurance of presence, the steady rhythm of another heartbeat near one's own. In the story of evolution, touch was never just survival. It was the quiet thread that tied bodies to bodies and lives to lives. It turned the skin, once a simple boundary, into a living bridge, carrying emotion, trust, and empathy through every generation that followed. And in that silent language, the human story found its voice. There was a time when the air itself dictated how life moved. As the cold of the Ice Age deepened and the open plains froze under shifting skies, bare skin that had once thrived beneath the African sun began to tremble beneath the new chill. The fire that humans had learned to tame glowed faintly against the dark, but even its warmth could not travel far. In that struggle between body and climate, a quiet invention began to take shape, not written in stone or song, but in the texture of skin against hide, in hands learning to make warmth out of what the earth provided. It was the day humanity began to clothe itself. Genetic clocks on clothing lice suggest garments appeared by roughly 170,000 years ago, providing a lower bound for habitual clothing. Archaeological clues, such as bone needles and hide processing marks, support a gradual emergence of sewn coverings. These traces, together with the lice that depended on human garments to live, tell of a transformation invisible in fossils, yet preserved in the most ordinary details of life. The first coverings were born from necessity, not design. Strips of animal hide, scraped clean with stone tools and softened by smoke and fat, were wrapped around shoulders and hips. Bone needles pierced edges of skin, pulling sinew through with deliberate precision. Fingers worked by instinct, stitching warmth from what nature had left behind. The smell of hide mixed with the scent of earth and ash, a sign of survival more than of craft. Each motion reflected patience and need. The same hands that once chipped flint and shaped spears now scraped hides, stretched them under sun, and cured them with care. Every puncture and tie carried the rhythm of persistence. When woven fibers appeared later, spun from grasses and plant stalks, they continued this lineage of innovation, protection reimagined through skill. Archaeology shows repeated concentrations of ash, charred bone, and stones reddened by heat. These hearths are the first durable evidence that hominins could gather warmth in place of a natural coat. Fire's light and heat gave immediate shelter to bare skin and a new social space for the group to gather. Fire provided communal warmth, and clothing provided mobile warmth. Together they completed a system that replaced fur. As humans began to wander beyond the equator, the materials around them changed. In colder regions, thick hides and furs formed layered coverings. In milder zones, woven grasses or bark fibers replaced them. Needles carved from bone left behind faint holes in ancient leather, the earliest signs of sewing as an art of survival. Each thread, each stitch, turned the body into a moving shelter. The act of covering the skin soon carried meaning beyond warmth. Around early fires, figures wrapped in hides sat close together, the flicker of flame catching the seams and textures of their clothing. Patterns formed where stitches met, a silent signature of the maker's hand. What began as protection grew into identity. A hunter might wear the pelt of the creature that sustained him. A mother wrapped her child in layers she had prepared herself. The covering became both shield and expression, Over time, materials evolved. Fibers twisted and woven into cloth replaced hides in regions where animals were scarce. Flax and bark were spun into thread, and small ornaments were sewn into garments. Shells, teeth, and stones turned into symbols of belonging. The craft that had begun as necessity now became language, shaping how humans saw one another. Yet behind this creativity remained an echo of the past. The same evolution that stripped the body of fur had compelled the mind to recreate it. Nature had taken away the coat once grown from flesh, and in response, humans made one with their hands. Fire warmed the group, but clothing carried that warmth wherever the body went. Together they formed an adaptation unlike any other, protection no longer grown, but built. Every seam and thread still carries the memory of that transformation. The first garments, rough and uneven, were ancestors of every robe, tunic, and woven fabric that followed. Beneath all artistry and invention lies the same instinct that guided those early hands, a quiet need to recover what was lost. The bare skin of humanity, once left open to the wind, found its refuge again, not in fur, but in creation itself. Deep inside every cell of the human body lies a code, written long before language, a set of instructions that shape skin, bone, and hair. It is not a story told in words, but in sequences of molecules folded into spirals and ladders. Within that code, a few small switches determined one of the most visible changes in the history of life: the loss of a full coat of fur. The transformation was not the work of a single moment, nor the deletion of a gene, but the quiet adjustment of several key regulators, each shifting slightly until the human body began to wear the world in a new way. Among the many genes that guide the growth of hair, three stand out like characters in a hidden orchestra: keratin, FGFR2, and HOXC13. Together they form part of the complex machinery that decides what kind of hair a creature grows, how thick it becomes, and where it appears. Keratin is the structural foundation, the tough protein that forms the fibers of every strand. It is found not only in hair, but also in nails and the outer layers of skin. Its molecules coil tightly, creating strength and resilience. In mammals with thick fur, keratin acts as the scaffold that holds the coat together, layer upon layer of fine fibers trapping warmth and protecting the skin beneath. FGFR2, or fibroblast growth factor receptor 2, plays a more subtle role. It is a messenger within the developing follicle, guiding cells on when to grow and when to rest. It helps shape the cycle of hair, ensuring that each strand emerges, lives its span, and is replaced. In furred mammals, this system is tuned to produce dense, even coverage. But in humans, the activity of FGFR2 shifted, altering the rhythm of growth. The follicles remained, but their signals weakened, producing finer, shorter hairs. The blueprint stayed intact, only the volume of the orchestra changed. Then there is HOXC13, a gene belonging to a larger family, responsible for pattern and placement, the architecture of the body in miniature. It tells embryonic cells where to form limbs, digits, and in this case, follicles. In the early stages of mammalian development, HOXC13 helps design the precise arrangement of hair across the skin, mapping which areas will grow thick and which will remain bare. In humans, mutations and regulatory adjustments within this gene softened those instructions. The pattern became patchy, less uniform, more specialized. Where animals grew layered coats, humans developed selective zones of hair, head, brows, and body, rather than a continuous pelt. These changes were not the result of destruction, but refinement. Evolution rarely erases, it edits. Instead of deleting genes for fur, the human lineage adjusted how they worked. Small shifts in regulatory regions, The parts of DNA that control timing and intensity reduced the output of hair building proteins. It was like dimming a light rather than turning it off. The follicles themselves remained, inherited from the same ancestors as chimpanzees and gorillas. What differed was their behavior. The same code that gave other primates their thick coats now produced finer, nearly invisible strands. This subtle divergence illustrates how evolution works with what already exists. The human genome and that of the chimpanzee are almost identical, separated by less than 2%. The difference lies not in what genes exist, but in when and where they are activated. In a chimpanzee embryo, the genes that drive keratin and FGFR2 are switched on early and strongly, flooding the skin with signals to grow dense, pigmented hair. In a human embryo, the same switches flicker at a lower intensity, their messages arriving later or fading sooner. The result is the same blueprint expressed with different emphasis, the difference between a symphony and a whisper. Over time, this genetic tuning gave rise to more than sparse hair. It altered the very texture of the skin itself. Without the heavy coat to protect it, the outer layer of human skin evolved a slightly thicker, more elastic surface. The follicles, no longer serving as the anchors for dense fur, became smaller and less active, their openings tightening to form the smooth appearance of modern skin. Collagen fibers beneath adjusted as well, creating a balance between flexibility and durability. The skin's new texture became both barrier and interface, a surface designed for exposure and contact rather than concealment. Under magnification, the human follicle still carries the memory of its past. It contains the same structures seen in other mammals: the bulb, the root sheath, the sebaceous gland that oils the strand, but in miniature. Some follicles still respond to hormones, thickening hair on the head or chest, while others remain quiet. This unevenness speaks to an evolution still in motion, not a finished design, but a living compromise between what was and what works now. The transformation that began with small mutations and regulatory tweaks reshaped the human relationship with its environment. It did not strip the species of protection entirely, it changed how protection was achieved. Where fur once insulated, skin adapted to cool. Where follicles once formed dense barriers, they now served as subtle sensors, detecting heat and movement. The same genes that once built coats began to collaborate in a new architecture of survival. And so, within every human cell lies the quiet record of that change. The genes are still there, folded in spirals of information, carrying the instructions for fur that will never grow. The difference lies in how softly they speak. Evolution did not silence them completely. It simply lowered their voice, allowing the skin to take their place. In those silent switches, in the delicate tuning of molecular rhythms, lies one of nature's simplest and most elegant transformations. The moment when a species rewrote the texture of its own surface, not by adding, but by letting go. Beneath the surface of every inch of human skin lies a network of tiny muscles, invisible to the eye, yet ancient in design. They rest quietly until the air turns cold, or a wave of emotion passes through the body, or a piece of music stirs something deep within. Then, in perfect silence, they awaken. Each one contracts, pulling at the root of a fine hair, lifting it ever so slightly. The skin ripples, forming a landscape of tiny peaks. In that moment, though the body stands hairless and modern, it performs a movement inherited from a time long before language, when fur and instinct ruled. These are the erector pili, the ghost muscles of our past. Each muscle is no larger than a thread, attached to the base of a hair follicle and anchored in the skin. When activated, it tugs the follicle upright, and what follows is familiar: a shiver across the arms, a chill at the back of the neck, the faint prickle that people call goosebumps. In animals still clothed in thick fur, This reaction serves a clear purpose. The raised hairs trap a layer of air, forming insulation that holds warmth close to the body. A frightened cat, its fur puffed out, looks larger to a predator, its muscles hardwired to use fear as a defense. The mechanism is precise, automatic, and deeply rooted in survival. For humans, stripped of fur long ago, the gesture remains, but its purpose has faded into memory. When the temperature drops, our erector pili still pull at the skin, but there is no dense coat to lift. The air does not trap, and warmth does not stay. The reflex endures not because it helps, but because it is embedded in the body's language, too ancient and too small to erase. It is the echo of an older rhythm, one the body continues to play even after the song has changed. The same reflex responds not only to cold, but to emotion. When fear passes through the nervous system, it releases a surge of signals that reach the muscles faster than thought. The skin tightens, the pulse quickens, and the hairs rise as if bracing for impact. Long ago, this would have made an animal look larger and more threatening, an instinctive warning to whatever danger loomed nearby. Now, in humans, it remains as a whisper of that same alarm, the flesh remembering how to defend itself even when the mind cannot see the threat. Yet fear is not the only thing that wakes these ancient muscles. The same current flows through the skin when awe strikes, when a powerful memory surfaces, or when music swells in a way that feels too vast for words. A song can lift the hairs on the arms as surely as a chill wind can. The body, unable to tell the difference between physical cold and emotional heat, responds the same way. The nervous system releases its quiet command, and the skin trembles as though touched by the ghost of a forgotten instinct. Scientists studying this reflex call it piloerection, a term that sounds clinical but describes something profoundly human. It is a bridge between biology and feeling, between what we once were and what we have become. In the laboratory, it can be measured by sensors and voltage. In life, it arrives without warning, during a quiet moment of wonder, in the pause before a storm, or when a voice in a song reaches the perfect note. It is both involuntary and intimate, the body revealing what the mind might never say aloud. There is a strange poetry in the way this reflex survives. It no longer shields us from cold, nor makes us appear larger to our enemies. It exists now as a kind of emotional fingerprint, one that appears in moments of beauty and terror alike. The same system that once protected early mammals from predators now responds to art, memory, and meaning. Somewhere along the way, survival learned to share its wiring with the soul. Under the microscope, the erector pili muscle is simple, a band of smooth fibers connected to a nerve. But viewed through the lens of time, it is something more profound. It is an artifact of warmth, fear, and wonder, preserved not in bone or fossil, but in motion. When it stirs, it reminds us that the body is older than consciousness, that every heartbeat carries echoes of creatures that lived before us. In the soft rise of goosebumps, we can trace that lineage. It is the same reflex that raised the fur of wolves on frozen nights, that rippled across the backs of apes in fear, that kept tiny mammals alive in prehistoric chill. It lingers in us as memory without language, proof that evolution does not erase its past, it writes over it in layers. The skin, smooth and exposed, still remembers what it once held. Each tiny muscle contracts in perfect silence, a gesture that no longer warms, but still connects. The cold that moves across the body, the thrill that lifts each hair, is not just sensation, it is history, breathing quietly through the flesh. And when it passes, when the muscles relax and the skin settles again, the air feels different, softer, closer, as if some hidden thread between past and present has loosened for a moment. The body, for all its change, still carries the ghost of its fur, waiting in every shiver, every note of music, every moment of awe. The memory of warmth remains, written not in words or thought, but in the tiny movements of the skin. The skin, once protected by fur, now stood bare beneath the open sky. Every gust of wind, every drop of rain, and every shard of sunlight pressed directly against it. What had once been a shield had become a threshold, thin and alive. The new human body could sense the world more deeply than ever before, but that sensitivity came with a cost. The sun burned the surface raw, the air stole moisture from it, and even the smallest cut could invite infection. Evolution had traded armor for awareness, and the price of that exchange was constant vigilance. Under the sun, the skin shimmered with sweat, each droplet a small defense against heat. But when the air turned dry and the shade was far, the body suffered. Ultraviolet light, unseen yet unyielding, bit into exposed skin and left it blistered and sore. For early humans who lived without shelter, sunburn and dehydration were not minor discomforts, they were limits on survival. To live bare was to live in tension with the elements, each day a careful negotiation between endurance and exhaustion. Dehydration crept silently. The same sweating that cooled the body also drained its stores of water and salt. Lips cracked, skin tightened, and dizziness blurred the horizon. Elders may have watched for the signs: dry mouths, slowing steps, eyes dulled by fatigue. To be hairless meant to be watchful, to plan for scarcity before it arrived. And beneath this fragile surface waited new dangers. Tiny cuts from thorn or stone could fester, spreading sickness through the bloodstream. Without the natural barrier of fur, the body relied on internal defenses, immune cells that moved like sentinels, and the faint acidic layer of sweat and oils that deterred microbes. The skin learned to heal faster, to close before the world could seep in, but instinct alone was not enough. Bare life required more than biology. It required help. A wounded hunter needed more than healing. They needed watchful companions, food shared around the fire, and help moving to safety. Such needs favored cooperative groups and shared vigilance, shaping social structure as much as anatomy. No longer could one body face the world alone. The bare human form demanded others nearby, hands to assist, eyes to guard, and warmth to share. Across generations, these necessities shaped new behaviors. Early humans built shelters from branches, bones, and woven grass, turning their intelligence outward to recreate the safety their bodies had lost. A hollow in the ground or a circle of stone became an artificial skin, protection that could be repaired, expanded, or carried to new places. As climate shifted, people began to move with the seasons, following rain and avoiding frost. Timing became knowledge, and memory became a map. Vulnerability also made kindness practical. A wound unattended could weaken the group, so care became survival. Hunters shared their food with the injured. Mothers nursed not only their own children, but others when needed. Insects and cold could not be fought by muscle alone, so people learned to share warmth, huddling close at night. The body's fragility taught cooperation before words could name it. At night, firelight washed over bare skin, its glow soft against the darkness. Around the flames, people ate, spoke, and repaired tools. Every gesture carried quiet coordination, a glance of warning, a hand offered in help, a word of reassurance. Light became safety, and safety became shared. Fire provided warmth for all, but it also revealed faces to one another, making emotion and empathy visible. Exposure had remade the species. The naked body, once a liability, became the center of a new kind of strength, one built not from isolation, but from connection. A single person could not endure the elements for long, but a group could build walls, find water, and carry the injured. Nakedness, once a mark of weakness, became the source of unity. That shared need for protection reshaped not only behavior, but the very idea of who counts as family and ally. The thin barrier of skin, vulnerable to every touch of the world, taught early humans the oldest lesson of survival, that safety was not found in solitude, but in one another. The wind that swept across the plains during the Ice Age carried the weight of frozen air, sharp enough to sting the eyes and tighten the skin within seconds. The warmth of the sun that once ruled the African savannas was replaced by a pale, distant glow that gave no comfort. Snow muffled the land in silence, and every breath turned to frost. The bare human form, once adapted to open plains and searing heat, now stood against a world that seemed determined to unmake it. The cold pressed hard against the skin, searching for weakness. Blood rushed to the surface to defend warmth, but it was never enough. Unprotected, the body trembled and slowed, losing heat faster than it could make it. To live in such a place demanded more than endurance, it demanded invention. Fire offered the first answer, its glow transforming darkness into safety. But flame alone could not follow across the endless miles of ice. The Ice Age swept over continents, and with it came the need to create new ways to hold warmth close. The mind turned outward, shaping protection not from the body but from the world itself. At some sites, arcs of mammoth bone recovered from permafrozen strata formed structural frames. Hides stretched over those frames, and central hearths produced a warm interior that could support life where bare skin alone could not. In Eastern Europe and Siberia, the remains of these dwellings still rest beneath layers of ancient soil, circular structures built from enormous ribs, tusks, and skulls. The hides were tied and stretched tight, forming thick walls that trapped the heat of a fire burning at the center. The ground inside was lined with furs, soft and insulating. Outside, snow drifted soundlessly against the curved walls. Inside, warmth glowed against the cold, the air heavy with smoke and breath. These shelters were more than mere cover. They were acts of engineering born from necessity. The ribs of giants became arches, the hides of hunted beasts became walls, and the fire's light became the heart of the home. Each construction spoke of planning, of cooperation, of a shared understanding of how to turn the cold itself into a material for survival. Archaeological sites reveal the precision behind such life. Near these dwellings, finely carved bone needles have been unearthed, some no larger than a finger and drilled with careful holes for threading sinew. Around them lie beads and fragments of worked hide, evidence that survival and artistry had begun to intertwine. Even in a world of ice, humans shaped not only tools, but meaning. The same hands that sewed garments also strung beads, decorating the clothing that guarded their bodies from the cold. Warmth had become both necessity and expression. The Ice Age pushed humans into new landscapes, each step forward demanding adaptation. Across the frozen plains, migration followed the retreat of the glaciers and the herds that grazed along their edges. Paths carved through permafrost and across tundra became living maps of persistence. The cold tested every movement, every decision, and every shared moment of endurance. Inside those shelters, life continued in rhythm with the fire. Shadows moved along the walls, voices murmured over the crackle of kindling, and the scent of smoke lingered in fur-lined air. The outside world howled and froze, but within, warmth pooled in the air like a kept secret. Children learned by watching, by feeling the heat of the hearth and the patience of their elders' hands. Each generation carried forward the knowledge of how to build, repair, and endure. In this frozen world, the human body had reached the limits of what it could endure, yet the mind refused to stop. It began to transform, not through flesh, but through memory. The art of surviving the cold became the art of shaping the world itself. Bones, hides, and firelight became the raw materials of resilience. When the wind screamed across the plains and snow swept over the mammoth bone shelters, the fires inside still burned. The air shimmered with heat and breath, and the sound of quiet voices rose against the storm. Outside lay an endless landscape of ice and silence. Inside, life continued, not through fur or instinct, but through the steady warmth of thought. The human skin is a living record, a surface written by light, wind, water, and time. It holds the memory of every landscape humanity has crossed, every climate it has endured, and every meal that has shaped its chemistry. It stretches and breathes, darkens and fades, thickens and softens. Beneath its quiet appearance lies a story that began millions of years ago, when the first bare bodies met the open air and began to adapt, cell by cell, to the places they called home. In its layers are traces of ancestry. The color of the skin tells not only where someone's ancestors lived, but how they met the sun. In regions where the light burned strongest, skin deepened in tone, filled with melanin that shielded the body's fragile interior from ultraviolet damage. Farther from the equator, where sunlight weakened and days grew shorter, skin lightened to draw more of that light inward, feeding the body's need for vitamin D. Across time, these differences became a living map of adaptation, a gradient painted directly onto humanity's surface. Far from static, pigmentation continues to evolve as populations move. Diets rich in marine foods allowed some groups to maintain darker skin at higher latitudes, while others relied on dietary vitamin D or lifestyle changes. Skin thus holds both geography and diet in its texture and tone. Even today, genetic studies reveal how migration and food have shaped the body's response to light. In some populations, genes once selected for darker pigmentation now coexist with pale tones inherited from colder regions, blending ancient solutions into new combinations. Modern life has carried skin into unfamiliar climates. People whose ancestors lived under tropical suns now settle beneath pale northern skies, while those from colder lands move to equatorial light. This meeting of different adaptations has created new challenges. In northern cities, darker skinned populations often face vitamin D deficiency, a lingering echo of evolutionary compromise. In the tropics, lighter skinned migrants encounter greater risk from the sun's intensity. Each example shows that the skin still negotiates with its environment, even in the age of technology. Beyond color, texture, and resilience also record where humanity has been. In humid places, skin remains smooth and supple, its surface balancing water and warmth. In colder climates, it thickens, forming a subtle defense against dryness and wind. Sweat glands vary too, some inherited from ancestors of open plains, others from those who lived in forests or coasts. These small variations seen together become the signature of ancestry, a history written in pores and patterns rather than words. The record of diet is equally deep. Populations that live near oceans carry traces of iodine and omega oils in their biology, while those from inland plains show adaptations to grain, meat, and minerals of the soil. These dietary histories influence how skin heals, how it ages, and how it reflects the world's balance of nutrients. Even now, in modern times, the skin still mirrors what a person consumes, brightening or dulling in quiet dialogue with sustenance. As the Earth's climate shifts, the story continues. Rising temperatures, altered sunlight, and changing weather patterns create new pressures that touch the skin before anything else. Scientists find subtle differences in how genes related to pigmentation, repair, and temperature regulation behave across regions. Evolution has not stopped, it simply moves at the speed of the planet, adjusting one cell at a time. In today's interconnected world, those ancient patterns intertwine. Air travel and migration have mixed lineages, once separated by oceans and mountain ranges. The skin that once told a single story now tells many at once. Melanin, texture, and tone blend in endless variation, forming a mosaic that records movement and union. Each shade, each pattern, each subtle difference is both heritage and adaptation, a living testimony to motion. The skin is a diary written without ink. It remembers without intent, preserving evidence of both ancestry and change. Beneath its surface, cells rise and fall in quiet renewal, each generation carrying faint lessons from the world it meets. Over time, those lessons accumulate, building a memory of light and air, of touch and weather, of the long journey that shaped the species. Even now, as people move beneath new skies and different suns, the skin continues to learn. It shifts imperceptibly, keeping pace with a world that never stands still. The record deepens with every heartbeat, written not in language, but in living color, a silent history that continues to unfold across the surface of humanity. Deep within the body, quiet messengers flow through the blood. They are small and invisible, yet their voices shape the very surface of the skin. Among them, two play a powerful role in one of evolution's most curious choices: why, after losing almost all of its fur, the human body kept some hair. Testosterone and its potent partner, dihydrotestosterone, or DHT, became the sculptors of this selective design. They whispered to certain follicles to wake again, but not all. Some would grow, others would rest, and the map of hair that remained would draw new patterns across the body. In the beginning, every hair follicle starts the same. Each is a small pocket beneath the skin, capable of producing a strand of keratin. But as the body develops, hormones decide which ones will stay quiet and which ones will speak. Testosterone and DHT act as signals, traveling through the bloodstream like gentle sparks, touching receptors in certain follicles and telling them to grow thicker, darker hair. These zones became the places where hair remained: the face, the chest, the arms, the legs, and other regions where visibility would one day mean something beyond warmth. The pattern of this activation differs between men and women, shaped by the balance of hormones within. In men, higher levels of testosterone awaken follicles on the jaw, chin, and chest, turning fine vellus hairs into coarse strands that catch the light. Facial hair becomes one of the most visible results, a secondary feature that arrives with puberty and stays through adulthood. On the chest and arms, it spreads like faint shadowing, tracing the body's shape. Women whose bodies carry much less testosterone keep most of these follicles silent. Their hair remains soft, faint, almost invisible against the skin, a continuation of the childhood coat that never darkens. The difference is not simply decoration, it carries deep biological roots. Across the animal world, secondary features often emerge as quiet signals of maturity, vitality, and health. In humans, hair became part of this subtle language. A beard's presence or absence told of hormonal strength, of readiness for reproduction, of adulthood achieved. But like all messages in nature, it worked in layers. Too much hair in the wrong place, or too little in others, could carry different meanings. Balance rather than excess became the sign of fitness. The body, however, does not act for appearance alone. Hormones affect hair growth for practical reasons as well. Testosterone and DHT interact with the skin's oil glands, keeping the surface supple and resistant to drying or cracking. In certain regions, hair helps to distribute oils, scent, and even warmth. Around joints, along the forearms and legs, hair contributes to the fine sensitivity of touch, amplifying the feeling of air, temperature, and movement. It allows the body to sense the world just before contact is made. The function remains subtle but constant, an ancient utility woven into modern skin. Yet even as hormones gave back certain hairs, they also took others away. The same signals that encouraged growth on the face and chest could, in higher concentrations or under certain genetic conditions, shrink follicles on the scalp. DHT, while stimulating some follicles, miniaturizes others, leading to thinning and eventual loss of hair on the crown. It is the same molecule performing two opposite tasks, depending only on where it lands and how the follicle responds. Inside each root, receptors interpret the same command differently, as if one cell hears music while another hears silence. This delicate push and pull reveals the body's endless negotiation between past and present, between function and form. Evolution found no need to return fur across the body, but it left these islands of growth as reminders, each regulated by chemistry. Hormones became the painters of this half kept coat, tracing lines that reflected both history and adaptation. The result is neither random nor purely aesthetic. It is a compromise, a balance struck between survival's demands and social communication. When people look at the fine hair on their arms or the darker strands that grow with age, they are seeing not just biology, but a quiet dialogue between molecules and memory. Testosterone rises and falls throughout life, shifting the texture and presence of hair. In youth, it grows strong and dense. With age, as levels decline, follicles rest again, their cycles slowing, their color fading. The process repeats endlessly, adjusting itself to time, health, and inheritance. Within this constant flux, there is an ongoing conversation written into the DNA, a tug of war between signals that want to grow and those that want to restrain. Each follicle listens, weighing chemical instructions that pull in opposite directions. The genes that once coded for full coats of fur still lie beneath the surface, waiting, while others, newer and subtler, keep them quiet. What results is a patchwork harmony, an unfinished evolution suspended between what was and what remains. The skin, bare in most places and furred in others, is the evidence of this negotiation. Hormones trace its boundaries daily, carrying the memory of distant ancestors who wore their hair as armor, while the modern body keeps only what it needs for touch, warmth, or signal. In that balance lies an unspoken truth. Evolution does not simply erase, it redefines. It leaves behind fragments of its work, not as mistakes, but as reminders. Beneath every follicle, this conversation continues. Cells listen to hormones that drift like tides, shaping the fine details of the body. The result is quiet, never fixed, always shifting, a map drawn in living ink, where every hair that grows or fades is part of a story still being written inside the skin. Across cultures, hair became a social text. In ancient Egypt, shaved heads and ornate wigs signaled status and hygiene. In Rome, styles indicated class and fashion. In East Asia, long uncut hair could signify filial respect. Each culture turned hair into a language of identity. In the heat of the Egyptian sun, hair was not simply grown, but constructed. Wigs of thick black locks, woven from human hair, wool, or palm fiber, crowned both men and women of high rank. Heads were often shaved smooth to ward off lice and heat, but wigs restored form and elegance. The wealthy perfumed and oiled them, while servants wore plain linen coverings. These elaborate designs became part of daily ritual, a marker of refinement in a land where appearance was bound to order and divinity. In ancient Greece, hair reflected ideals of harmony and beauty. It was cleansed with olive oil, curled into deliberate patterns, and fastened with ribbons or gold pins. In Rome, the craft of grooming expanded into an institution. Barber shops lined the streets, and trends moved with politics and power. Men of discipline kept their hair short and clean, while women arranged intricate curls and braids, some towering high with the aid of wax and thread. Hairstyles announced class, virtue, and allegiance. The art of arranging hair became as expressive as sculpture, transforming the head into a living emblem of civilization. Across the East, hair carried spiritual and moral significance. In ancient China, it was regarded as a sacred inheritance from one's parents. To cut it without reason was to sever respect. Children were taught that uncut, neatly bound hair reflected virtue and obedience. Scholars tied theirs in knots of dignity. Warriors bound their hair for battle. Monks shaved their heads in surrender to higher devotion. Nobility decorated theirs with combs, jade ornaments, and silk cords that reflected rank. In Japan, the samurai's topknot served as both armor and oath, signaling readiness for combat and loyalty to their lord. In the Hindu traditions of South Asia, hair also marked devotion. Ascetics shaved their heads as a sign of detachment from worldly desire, while others grew long, uncut locks in spiritual discipline. In Polynesia and parts of Africa, hair was woven and sculpted into towering forms that displayed lineage, age, and status. Every style told a story that the tongue did not need to speak. Across centuries, the pattern repeated. To groom one's hair was to define one's place in the social order. Kings and priests, servants and soldiers, each wore their identity in strands that could be shaped but not ignored. The early loss of fur had left humanity exposed, yet this remaining hair became its canvas of meaning. It was polished, coiled, cut, or hidden according to custom, turning biology into code. Through time, styles evolved with belief and empire. In medieval Europe, monks shaved the crowns of their heads to show humility before God, while rulers kept long flowing hair as a symbol of divine right. In the Islamic world, cleanliness and grooming became acts of faith. In Africa, intricate braiding patterns marked tribal ties and personal history, each one a design carried across generations. The Renaissance revived hair as an art form, shaping it into elaborate architecture of curls and powder. In China's Qing dynasty, men were ordered to shave the front of the head and braid the rest into a queue, an edict that turned hairstyle into politics. In Europe's Age of Enlightenment, powdered wigs became symbols of authority and reason, worn in courts and assemblies as emblems of order. In modern times, hair remained a stage where society declared itself. The industrial era turned grooming into business, producing oils, combs, and dyes for a growing public market. The 20th century transformed it again. Long hair became protest, cropped hair became independence, and color became statement. Every culture, every generation continued to use it as shorthand for belonging and dissent alike. What began as the last remnant of the body's ancient covering had become a marker of civilization itself. Across deserts, temples, palaces, and cities, humanity spoke through the strands that remained. Hair became proof that adaptation was not only physical, but cultural, that what evolution took away, creativity endlessly reshaped. The skin may look bare, but beneath the light and touch of the world, it is never truly alone. Every inch of it, from the curve of the shoulder to the hollow of the wrist, carries an invisible world. It is a landscape populated by millions of tiny organisms, bacteria, fungi, and microscopic mites, living in quiet harmony. Together they form a living shield, a vast and invisible cloak that guards the naked body from what it cannot see. Under magnification, this unseen world comes alive. The surface of the skin, which to the naked eye seems smooth, becomes a terrain of ridges, valleys, and open plains. Sweat pores glisten like wells, hair follicles rise like hills, and in between lie endless corridors where life thrives. Every region hosts its own community. The oily slopes of the forehead, the moist valleys beneath the arm, the dry plains of the forearm. Each has its native species, adapted perfectly to its tiny corner of the human landscape. These microbes are ancient companions. They arrived long before humans stood upright, before they walked under the sun without fur. When the coat was lost and the skin was laid bare, the relationship deepened. Without fur, the skin became a frontier, exposed to light, wind, and the unseen swarm of the environment. The microbial world stepped forward, filling a role that evolution had left vacant. It became a new form of protection, a soft armor built not of hair or hide, but of symbiosis. Some of these microscopic partners guard against invaders. They live close to the pores and feed on oils that the skin produces, creating acids that keep harmful bacteria away. Others crowd the surface in numbers so great that they leave no room for pathogens to settle. There are species that communicate directly with the immune system, teaching it what to fight and what to tolerate. Every time the skin meets the outside world, a hand on bark, a foot in the dirt, a cheek brushed by wind, the microbes sense and respond, maintaining balance without ever asking for notice. There is no uniformity in this alliance. The skin of a newborn carries one kind of world, the skin of a farmer another, and the skin of a diver or artist yet another. Even two hands from the same body can hold slightly different populations, each molded by contact and habit. Soap, sun, and soil all sculpt the microbiome's composition, erasing some species, encouraging others. Yet no matter the changes, the partnership remains. Every wash, every touch, every breath renews it. In many ways, this invisible cloak has replaced the role of fur. Hair once trapped warmth and kept away biting insects. Now microbes form a living layer that defends against infection, preserves moisture, and softens the harshness of exposure. Some even produce molecules that help heal wounds faster, while others feed on dead skin cells, recycling them quietly into nourishment. Together, they create a balance that no single organism could sustain alone. The bare human body, once thought vulnerable, carries within it a civilization so intricate that it rivals coral reefs in complexity. Scientists studying this world have found more life in a single square centimeter of skin than there are people in entire cities. Each cell of the body is outnumbered by these microbial companions, yet there is no conflict in their presence. They do not weigh the body down, nor do they make themselves known. Their success lies in their silence. Like shadows cast by life itself, they thrive only in cooperation. There is something almost poetic in the arrangement. The loss of fur, which once seemed like a weakness, opened the door for a deeper kind of connection. The naked surface of human skin became an ecosystem, a meeting place between species, each relying on the other's existence. The body learned to live not in isolation, but as a host, a living planet wrapped in invisible life. This partnership stretches beyond protection. It shapes scent, texture, and even perception. The faint smell of skin, unique to every individual, is partly the work of these microbes breaking down natural oils. They help define the subtle chemistry that makes one body distinct from another. In this way, identity itself becomes a shared creation, formed not by the person alone, but by the many lives that dwell upon them. When seen through this lens, the bare human skin is not empty. It is not naked in the truest sense. It is clothed in a living fabric, finer than any woven thread, a cloak made of cooperation, adaptation, and time. Each cell of the skin breathes alongside millions of others, both human and microbial, creating a unity that hums quietly beneath the surface. Under sunlight, this invisible world glows in unseen activity, regulating, repairing, protecting. It endures through sweat and storm, through the press of fabric and the touch of another hand. Even when unseen, it remains constant, steadfast in its task. The human body may have lost its fur, but it never truly lost its covering. It found one again, not through evolution's hand alone, but through partnership, a silent agreement between the visible and the unseen. And so, wrapped in this invisible cloak, humanity walks the earth not alone, but surrounded by an army of gentle allies, carrying with it the quiet hum of a living world that never stops watching, guarding, and breathing alongside it. Long before words, before gestures, before the first sparks of language, there was scent. Every creature carried its story through the air, invisible trails of chemistry that spoke of danger, calm, hunger, or desire. For early humans, bare skinned and exposed, smell became one of the most intimate ways the body could speak without sound. Each drop of sweat, each faint change in skin chemistry, told others what could not yet be said. Sweat was not only a sign of heat or effort, it was a quiet messenger carrying emotions that the body could not hide. When fear struck, the glands deep beneath the skin released a different kind of signal, one born from the same chemicals that tightened the chest and quickened the heart. When joy filled the body, the scent changed again, lighter and almost sweet, carried softly by the air. In groups of early humans, these signals mattered. They told companions when someone was frightened, when someone was ready to fight, or when calm had returned. Scent passed between bodies like invisible language, guiding cooperation, comfort, and survival. The surface of the skin holds two kinds of sweat glands. The first, called eccrine glands, spread across nearly every inch of the body, releasing clear, salty moisture that cools through evaporation. The second, apocrine glands, lie deeper, clustered in the armpits, groin, and around hair follicles. Their secretions are rich and oily, filled with proteins and lipids that by themselves carry little odor. It is only when these meet the skin's natural bacteria that scent begins to bloom. The microbes feed on those secretions, breaking them down into complex molecules that drift into the air. When the human body lost most of its fur, this chemistry began to change. Without a thick coat to trap and hold scent, sweat could dry more quickly, and odors became subtler, less enduring. For other mammals, fur carries the smell of the individual, a marker of identity and territory. For humans, scent became more fleeting, more tied to moment and mood than permanence. It no longer lingered for days, but instead rose and faded with each movement of the air. The bare skin, exposed and open, released signals that spoke in whispers instead of shouts. Yet these whispers were still powerful. Studies of human scent show that even now, people can detect fear, stress, or attraction through smell alone. A trace of sweat taken from someone under pressure can trigger the same areas of the brain that respond to danger. Partners can recognize each other by scent more easily than by sound or sight. A newborn can find its mother in darkness by the smell of her skin. Though modern life hides it beneath layers of soap and fragrance, the human body still carries the language of scent deep within it. There is an irony in how far this sense has been buried. The same odors that once guided bonding and protection are now scrubbed away, masked by perfumes and deodorants. Modern culture treats scent as something to erase, a flaw to be hidden beneath chemical stillness. Deodorants suppress sweat, stopping the natural flow of moisture and signaling. Fragrances overwrite the body's quiet voice with artificial notes, floral, woody, fresh. The invisible communication that once kept our ancestors alive has become an embarrassment, a thing we strive to silence. Yet the instinct remains. A person may find comfort in the worn scent of a shirt left behind, or in the faint trace of another's skin on their pillow. Entire memories rise from a single smell, a fire in the distance, a field after rain, the salt of another person's neck. These are not accidents of nostalgia. They are reminders that scent was once a compass of emotion and belonging. The olfactory nerves run straight to the brain's oldest regions, the same ones that govern memory and survival. To smell something deeply familiar is to touch time itself, to return to the body's first way of knowing the world. The science of scent still reveals its hidden importance. Sweat produced during fear contains compounds that can cause others nearby to unconsciously tense their muscles or heighten alertness. Pheromones, though weaker in humans than in other animals, still influence attraction and comfort, shaping how people move toward or away from one another. Even the bacteria that live on the skin, those same silent craftsmen of odor, vary from person to person, giving each individual their own chemical signature. What seems like a simple smell is in truth a coded message, a mixture of biology, mood, and memory. As humanity covered its skin, it also covered this part of itself. But the language of scent has never vanished. It waits beneath the surface, speaking softly through the pores. It hums in the background of every interaction, shaping impressions that the mind cannot fully name. Two strangers passing might not notice why one feels familiar or comforting, yet their bodies exchange molecules that speak in the oldest of dialects. In a world of sound and sight, the sense of smell remains quiet, but it endures. It carries echoes of the savannas where the first humans stood, the smoke of fires that kept them warm, the closeness of others in the dark. Every breath still draws in traces of this ancient story. Molecules of fear, trust, or recognition suspended in air. Though forgotten by language, the scent of the human body still belongs to the rhythm of life, to touch, to memory, to the unseen connection between one living being and another. It lingers around us, faint but real, the last whisper of the wild within the calm of our skin. The surface of human skin seems delicate, soft to the touch, thin enough for light to catch its sheen, warm enough to breathe under a palm. Yet beneath that softness lies an astonishing complexity, a living architecture built to protect, repair, and remember. Every square inch of it holds layers of motion. Cells rise and fall, fibers stretch and weave, capillaries pulse with warmth. Though it appears fragile, the skin is among the body's most adaptable organs, designed not merely to shield, but to endure. The outermost layer, the epidermis, is as thin as paper on most parts of the body. It forms the boundary between the inner world of blood and muscle and the air that moves outside. Its cells are born deep within and slowly rise toward the surface, changing shape as they go. By the time they reach the top, they have died, leaving behind a thin armor of keratin, a silent layer of protection that flakes away with time. Every few weeks, this layer renews itself completely, replaced by the next wave of cells climbing from below. Beneath it, the dermis provides structure, laced with collagen and elastin that gives skin both strength and flexibility. It is the fabric that allows a knee to bend, a hand to close, or a face to smile without tearing. Inside this living fabric, healing is constant. A small scratch sets off a flurry of motion, cells divide faster, platelets seal the breach, and collagen fibers weave themselves across the wound like a net. Even the faintest scar carries the memory of that process, the body's quiet signature of repair. Some scars fade almost entirely, their edges softened by time, while others remain, thicker and paler, reminders of how the body prioritizes safety over perfection. The process is not flawless, but it is tireless. Skin, unlike most organs, never truly stops growing. It renews from the inside out, season after season, as though evolution had decided that to live in the open world required endless resilience. For all its beauty, human skin was not designed for ease. It must balance softness with survival. Its outer layers allow for touch, warmth, and sensation, yet its deeper tissues, hold the strength to withstand abrasion, cold, and impact. Collagen, the most abundant protein within it, forms a microscopic lattice that absorbs strain while preserving elasticity. When tension rises, the fibers stretch and then realign, preventing tears. When pressure fades, they relax again, ready for the next movement. This constant adjustment gives skin its paradoxical quality, tender yet tough, supple yet unyielding. Compared to its primate cousins, human skin took an unusual evolutionary path. In chimpanzees and gorillas, the dermis is thicker, their outer surface protected by denser hair and tougher epidermal layers. Their skin must resist the friction of climbing bark and the bite of insects beneath heavy fur. Human skin, by contrast, thinned and specialized. Without fur, it developed a denser network of sweat glands and a more refined sense of touch. What it lost in physical armor, it gained in sensitivity and regulation. The naked surface became a sensory field, one capable of perceiving the faintest breeze, the warmth of sunlight, or the nearness of another body. It became an organ not just of defense, but of communication. Yet this change did not leave it weak. Human skin heals faster than that of most primates. Its wounds close sooner, its collagen adapts more rapidly to stress. It has learned to bend without breaking, to bruise without failing. Even under the strain of constant movement, it protects the delicate systems beneath. This strength is not obvious to the eye because it hides beneath beauty. A fingertip, thin and luminous under light, is stronger per unit of weight than most metals, yet soft enough to feel the heartbeat of another through contact. Inside the skin, millions of sensory nerves weave upward from deeper tissues, each responding to different forms of touch, heat, pressure, vibration, or pain. Together they create a map of awareness, a constant flow of information from the outside world. The same surface that heals and protects also perceives. This duality is what gives human skin its quiet genius. It is both shield and sensor, a barrier that feels. Every contact, whether wind, fabric, or warmth, is translated into electrical signals that race toward the brain. From these signals, the mind builds the sensation of the world. Even its imperfections reveal design. The lines that crease with age, the freckles that bloom under sunlight, the scars that remain after injury, all are marks of a system in motion. The skin records life as it unfolds, storing traces of every environment it meets. In humid air, it softens. In dry climates, it thickens. When light burns too strongly, pigment cells awaken, producing melanin to defend against it. Each change is an answer to circumstance, a reflection of how the body continues to negotiate with its surroundings. In the balance between vulnerability and endurance, evolution sculpted something extraordinary. Human skin became a soft armor, one that flexes, breathes, and feels. Its thickness varies, its pigments shift, its texture reflects ancestry and adaptation, yet across all variations, the same principle holds: survival through transformation. It is a surface that never hardens completely, a protection that never closes itself off from sensation. Under light, the skin glows with warmth, revealing its living depth. Beneath it, cells continue their silent labor, dividing, healing, sensing. Every second, it renews its promise to protect without becoming impenetrable, to endure without losing grace. Evolution, in its quiet precision, shaped a barrier that invites contact, a softness that lasts, and in that softness lies its strength, a living reminder that resilience does not always come from hardness, but from the ability to mend, to adapt, and to endure. In the story of life on Earth, fur has always been one of nature's simplest and most effective designs. It kept the body warm, shielded skin from the sun, and provided a thin armor against the world's rough edges. Yet, through the long sweep of evolution, some creatures began to give it up. Across oceans, deserts, and underground tunnels, the pattern repeated itself. Hair was shed, coats were thinned, and skin was left more exposed to the elements. Humans are only one of many species to have taken this path, though their reasons and their results are unlike any other. In the sea, smoothness became survival. Dolphins, whose ancestors once walked on land, traded their fur for a sleek, bare surface that could slip through water with ease. Each hair that remained was reduced to a sensory bristle, a tool for feeling the movement of waves rather than trapping warmth. The sea took what it needed and stripped away the rest. Whales followed the same course, losing their coats as they grew massive and slow, their thick layers of fat now serving as insulation in place of hair. Seals and manatees balanced between both worlds, keeping only thin, scattered fur that would not drag against the pull of water. Far from the ocean, on land where the sun burned and dust clung to the air, elephants walked under a different logic. Their enormous size made heat a constant threat, and fur only worsened it. Their ancestors, small and shaggy creatures long extinct, once wore coats against the chill of earlier ages. But as the planet warmed and forests turned to plains, their descendants shed those coats to survive. Now only sparse bristles remain on an elephant's back, reminders of the woolly lineage it once belonged to. The same pattern appeared in the rhinoceros and the hippopotamus, mammals of heat and mud, whose skin thickened instead of fur, forming its own form of defense. Deep beneath the surface of the earth, the naked mole rat lives in perpetual darkness, where warmth is constant and light never reaches. Inside its tunnels, the air is humid and still, and the ground itself is body temperature. Fur would have no purpose here. These creatures live hairless, not from exposure, but from the absence of it. Without fur, their skin brushes easily against soil and stone, their nakedness a perfect adaptation for the underworld they inhabit. Across these examples, the dolphin, the elephant, the mole rat, a pattern unfolds. Hairlessness is not a single story, but a repeated experiment in evolution. Each case began from a different ancestor, in a different environment, yet the result was the same. Shedding fur was never about vanity, never about aesthetics. It was about trade-offs, about the body learning to balance heat, friction, and survival in changing worlds. The human story fits within this larger rhythm, but also stands apart. Unlike these other species, humans did not stop at biology. They paired their hair loss with something new: intelligence, the ability to manipulate the environment itself. Where the elephant relied on size, the dolphin on streamlining, and the mole rat on darkness, early humans built tools, shelters, and fire. Their nakedness did not end with adaptation, it opened the door to invention. They made clothing from skins, warmth from flame, and shade from woven leaves. No other species combined physical vulnerability with such mental strength. It was as if the body had stepped back, leaving the mind to take its place. For a time, some scientists tried to link this shift to the ocean. The aquatic ape hypothesis, first proposed in the 20th century, suggested that humans might have lost their fur through a semi-aquatic phase, wading, diving, and living near water like seals or otters. The smoothness of the human body, the distribution of subcutaneous fat, and even the tendency to hold the breath were seen as clues. The idea was simple and evocative, imagining early humans as coastal foragers, shaped by tides and shores. Yet the evidence did not hold firmly. Fossils showed that early humans evolved primarily in savannas, not lagoons. The patterns of bone, diet, and tool use pointed to grasslands and dry forests, not watery homes. The body's adaptations, sweat glands, upright posture, and sparse hair, fit better with heat and open landscapes than with waves and currents. The aquatic theory, while poetic, lacked the grounding that science requires. Still, It left behind an important thought that hairlessness in its many forms is not one path but many, each molded by circumstance rather than destiny. In the broader view, evolution's repetition becomes clear. When fur disappears, it is never random. It happens where heat must escape quickly, where water or friction makes hair a burden, or where another system, like blubber, sweat, or intelligence, takes its place. Nature favors efficiency, not uniformity. Across species, the skin became a stage for innovation, adapting not through excess but through refinement. Humans, in their own way, represent the culmination of that principle. Their skin became both shield and instrument, a surface for touch, temperature, and connection. The loss of fur was not the loss of identity, but a transformation of it. The same evolutionary forces that smoothed the dolphin and bared the mole rat shaped the human in their image, yet went one step further. They gave the mind enough imagination to see the pattern, to understand it, and to give it meaning. Under the same sun that shines on elephant hide and whale skin, the human body stands as another variation of the same experiment, one where intelligence, not insulation, became the final form of protection. Evolution, through repetition and chance, had once again chosen to reveal the power that lies in simplicity. Inside the quiet warmth of the womb, before lungs have tasted air or eyes have opened to light, the human body begins its story in miniature. Floating in its private ocean, a developing fetus grows a coat of fine, silvery hair called lanugo. Each strand is as delicate as a spider's thread, covering nearly every inch of the tiny body, the shoulders, the cheeks, the back, even the forehead. Under the filtered glow of the amniotic fluid, the skin appears soft and translucent, and the hairs shimmer like a faint halo, swaying gently with every movement. Lanugo arrives midway through pregnancy, around the 5th month, just as the skin forms its first layers and the body begins to take shape. It is the earliest whisper of the mammalian past, a soft covering that once protected ancestors from cold or sunlight. In the womb, its purpose is different, but no less vital. The lanugo anchors a creamy wax-like substance called vernix caseosa, a rich blend of oils and shed skin cells that forms a natural barrier between the baby and its watery surroundings. Together, the lanugo and vernix act like a protective film, keeping the skin supple and shielding it from constant contact with amniotic fluid. Lanugo prods and holds the vernix in place. When the child draws near term, lanugo sheds into the fluid, and vernix thickens the skin's barrier. In preterm birth, lanugo remains as a marker of developmental stage. By the 7th or 8th month, the fetus has grown strong enough to regulate its own warmth, and the need for that fine covering fades. Tiny hairs drift off into the amniotic fluid, mixing invisibly with the suspended particles that surround the unborn child. Some of this hair may even be swallowed, later becoming part of the newborn's first digestive waste, meconium, a small reminder that nothing in development is wasted. By the time of birth, most babies arrive nearly bare, their skin pink and smooth, though traces of lanugo sometimes remain along the shoulders, the forehead, or the small of the back. In premature infants, the coat may still be thick, soft as mist beneath the hospital lights. Within days or weeks, it disappears completely, replaced by the faint invisible vellus hairs that mark childhood. When viewed up close, the fetal skin tells this story with remarkable precision. Under magnification, the follicles form orderly rows across the surface, as if guided by an unseen clock. They bloom in waves, head to toe, in perfect timing, and then, just as rhythmically, they begin to rest. It is a molecular countdown that knows when to begin and when to stop, the follicle clock, a pattern carried quietly through the ages, unchanged in essence, though altered in purpose. The Lanugo's disappearance marks another shift, one from the sheltered world of water to the open air of birth. When the baby is finally born, its bare skin is no longer a symbol of vulnerability, but of readiness. The body that once borrowed fur for protection now meets the world without it, relying instead on warmth from others, on touch and care. Even after Lanugo vanishes, its purpose lingers in silence, written in the cycles of growth and renewal that continue long after birth. Each hair that rises and falls in adulthood, each follicle that wakes and rests, follows the same ancient rhythm that once covered the unborn child. It is the skin's memory of time, hidden beneath the surface, ticking softly, a reminder that before we ever take our first breath, the story of our evolution is already being told. In the vast story of evolution, the human body carries both progress and residue, traces of what it once was and what it might have been. Beneath the smooth surface of the skin lies an intricate web of instructions, written long ago and passed through generations. Most remain silent, folded away like forgotten letters, but sometimes, through chance or mutation, one of these old codes reawakens, and the body begins to follow an unexpected pattern written deep in its history. In rare individuals, this quiet disturbance appears as hypertrichosis, a condition where dense hair grows across the face, limbs, or even the entire body. The hair is soft and fine, not monstrous or wild, but persistent, as if the skin has remembered a command that was meant to stay silent. Scientists studying hypertrichosis trace it to a disruption in genetic regulation. The DNA that controls hair growth is still present in every human, but its switches are normally turned off. In this condition, a misfire occurs in those switches, and follicles that should rest instead awaken. Hypertrichosis and alopecia provide windows into regulatory control. In one case, follicle expression is inappropriately activated. In another case, immune or hormonal signals silence follicles. Both show that the same genetic toolkit can be read in very different ways. In alopecia areata, the body's immune system mistakes hair follicles for foreign tissue. The attack causes strands to fall away from the scalp, face, or limbs, leaving smooth patches where the skin once produced hair. In androgenic alopecia, which follows hormonal pathways, the follicles do not die but shrink, creating hair so fine it becomes invisible to the eye. Scientists describe this process as miniaturization, a gradual retreat of the follicle from its full expression. Together, these conditions reveal how finely tuned the body's genetic regulation must be. Hair is not simply switched on or off. It is governed by a network of chemical messengers and molecular signals that rise and fall in rhythm. A single miscue can open or close entire pathways. The same set of genes that once shaped our ancestors' coats still exist, but their instructions have been repurposed, muted, or redirected. During early development, those old patterns appear again for a brief time. Each embryo grows a temporary coat of Lanugo hair before birth, a protective layer that later sheds away. In hypertrichosis, that cycle continues longer than it should, as if the clock that cues the shutdown never strikes its hour. The result is not a reversion to an ancient form, but a reminder of how the body's timing controls its expression. To scientists, these rare conditions offer more than curiosity. They're glimpses into the machinery that decides which parts of our evolutionary history remain active and which stay quiet. Every cell carries the same code, but what matters is how that code is read. A misplaced signal, a shift in the immune response, or an error in hormonal balance can all alter the outcome. The study of hypertrichosis and alopecia shows that evolution is not an act of creation and erasure, but one of constant editing. Genes once used for warmth or display still lie embedded in our DNA, their potential preserved though seldom used. When their regulation falters, the skin records the moment, producing visible traces of a deeper biological story. Each follicle that grows or falls silent carries within it a trace of this balance. The mechanisms that make one person bald and another unusually hairy are part of the same system, one tuned over millions of years. It is a network of feedback and restraint, written in molecules and measured in time. When viewed through this lens, these conditions no longer appear as anomalies, but as natural experiments, brief exposures of the code that built us. They remind us that within the smooth surface of human skin lies an archive of possibilities, some long dormant, some still quietly alive. Every strand that grows or disappears tells the same truth that evolution continues to write, revise, and remember. The world that shaped human skin no longer exists. The blazing savannas, the icy plains, the endless rains and winds that once sculpted the body's defenses have given way to something entirely new, a world of shelter, glass, and control. Where the skin once faced the raw extremes of sun and storm, it now lives behind walls, beneath clothing, and under artificial light. The same organ that once carried the memory of survival now adjusts to an age where the environment itself has been redesigned. Sunscreen, glass windows, heating and air conditioning, and global migration all alter the selective landscape. Where sunlight once shaped pigmentation and outdoor life determined vitamin D balance, modern life cushions those forces. Artificial light replaces the rhythms of the sun, and ultraviolet radiation, once a sculptor of pigment and bone health, is filtered or avoided. Climate control eliminates both heat and cold as evolutionary pressures. The body still holds the mechanisms that evolved for a harsher world, but the challenges that once guided their refinement have softened. This buffering of nature has its own consequences. Vitamin D deficiency now arises not from lack of food, but from protection against sunlight. Supplements replace exposure, clothing and shade take over melanin's ancient duty. At the same time, human migration mixes populations faster than any natural process once could. Genes once confined to particular regions now blend freely. Pigmentation and adaptation to light levels, once local responses, become global mosaics. Selective pressures weaken, and random gene drift takes their place. Evolution has not stopped, but it moves differently now. The pace of change is no longer set by survival against the elements, but by culture, medicine, and chance. This is relaxed selection, a slowing of nature's hand. The skin, once tuned to geography and light, now adapts instead to habits, technologies, and the comforts we create for ourselves. Alongside this easing of natural pressures comes a new kind of power, human-directed evolution. Biotechnology offers the means to alter genes directly. Tools such as CRISPR make targeted edits possible, turning the slow work of mutation into deliberate choice. What once took millennia of trial can, in theory, be adjusted in a laboratory. Genes that influence pigment, repair, and texture are now readable and perhaps editable. That capability introduces a new form of selection, one guided by intention rather than environment. It holds promise for healing, restoring pigment in vitiligo, regenerating skin after burns, reducing inherited disorders, but also brings uncertainty. Genes do not act alone. They interact, overlap, and influence far more than the traits they appear to control. A change meant for one purpose may ripple into others. This is pleiotropy, the rule that no gene belongs entirely to one function. As this new frontier unfolds, ethics move alongside science. To edit what evolution has written is to touch not only the body, but the history it carries. The skin has always been both boundary and identity, a record of adaptation and ancestry. Altering it by design changes how humanity relates to both nature and itself. The story of skin in modern times is no longer one of survival, but of stewardship. Nature's selection has quieted, replaced by our own interventions, sometimes protective, sometimes transformative. Whether the balance that follows will preserve what time has refined or reshape it entirely remains unseen. For now, the skin endures, ancient in structure, yet surrounded by comfort, carrying within it the memory of light, of heat, and of the long experiment that made it what it is. Evolution continues, though its author may be changing. There is a quiet truth written across the human body, a truth of exposure, of fragility, of meaning. The absence of fur, which once marked a turning point in evolution, became more than a biological change. It became a condition of being. To live in bare skin is to live without disguise, to meet the world without a barrier between self and environment. From the moment early humans stepped into open light, their skin began to speak in ways no other creatures could. It became not only protection, but expression. Bare skin taught a species what vulnerability felt like, and from that knowing grew stories, rituals, and art. Nakedness became not only a state of bodies, but a lens through which communities defined moral order and aesthetic value. Exposure made awareness possible. It made the act of being seen both intimate and symbolic. To appear without covering was no longer merely physical, it was to exist before others, to acknowledge presence. In that exposure lay the beginnings of empathy and self-consciousness. The visible body revealed not only strength and beauty, but weakness and pain. It reminded people that the surface of one being resembled the surface of another. The body could bruise, burn, and heal in the same way, and through that shared condition, the sense of human sameness deepened. Vulnerability connected individuals to one another long before language gave it form. As time passed, this awareness grew into culture. The body became both a canvas and a question. Pigment, jewelry, and fabric turned the act of covering or uncovering into meaning. To reveal skin was to express identity, to withhold it was to claim privacy or power. What began as necessity became language, and that language evolved into art. In sculpture and painting, the human form became the measure of beauty and truth. Ancient artists carved muscle, bone, and curve into stone, not merely to imitate nature, but to understand it. The exposed body came to symbolize harmony, courage, and divinity. Yet the same image could also stir unease. As beliefs changed, so did the meaning of the uncovered form. What was once sacred could become shameful, and what was once hidden could return as expression. Nakedness moved between reverence and taboo, mirroring the balance between freedom and restraint. Philosophers and poets turned this tension into reflection. They saw that to be seen is both gift and risk. Visibility exposes imperfection as much as beauty. It invites judgment, yet also recognition. The bare form became a metaphor for honesty, the idea that truth requires exposure. In that sense, nakedness was never only about the body, but about consciousness, the awareness of being both observer and observed. Modern life has not dissolved these meanings, only multiplied them. In a world saturated with images, the body is displayed and concealed at once. Fashion, media, and art continue the same conversation begun in the first human gesture of covering the skin. Every image of the body, whether exalted or censored, asks the same question: what does it mean to be seen? Nakedness today is no longer bound to survival, but to self-expression and identity. It represents the meeting point of biology and culture, instinct and idea. To reveal oneself, in body or emotion, still carries the same paradox. It is both liberation and exposure. The tension between openness and concealment remains one of the deepest themes of human thought. Skin, in this light, is both surface and symbol. It marks the boundary between self and world, yet allows connection through touch, warmth, and sight. Every scar and line records contact with life, each a trace of time's passage across living flesh. To live in bare skin is to accept visibility as part of existence. It is to recognize that every act of concealment or display belongs to the same story, the story of a species learning to balance its inner life with its outer form. Nakedness, stripped of fear and ornament, remains the most human of states, open to the world, aware of being seen, and still willing to stand within the light. When the first humans stood bare beneath the open sky, they were fragile in a way no creature had been before. The fur that had once shielded their ancestors from cold and sun was gone, leaving skin exposed to wind, insects, and injury. Yet this loss, which might have seemed like nature's mistake, became the quiet beginning of something extraordinary. Stripped of their coat, early humans learned to reach beyond themselves for warmth, protection, and connection. Their weakness forced them to create. The nights on the savannah were cold and long. Without fur, every gust of wind cut against the skin, every drop of rain stole warmth. But somewhere in that discomfort, a new kind of thinking began. The fragile body demanded innovation. From the friction of sticks came fire. From the need for shelter came clothing and structure. From exposure came community. The pattern was set. What the body lacked, the mind supplied. The same dynamic repeats across human evolution. A physical deficit opened a conceptual gap, and the mind filled it. Loss of fur was the first of many such openings. When the body could not fly, it built tools to lift itself into the air. When it could not see in darkness, it learned to make light. Every boundary became an invitation to think beyond biology. As time passed, the pattern deepened. The loss of instinctual protection gave rise to strategy and cooperation. Where other species relied on muscle or claw, humans relied on one another. The absence of natural defense created the need for social defense, the circle of protection that became family, tribe, and culture. A wounded hunter could no longer survive alone, so care itself became an adaptation. Shared food, shared shelter, shared memory, each was a form of survival built from limitation. Language followed the same rhythm. Without fur, the body lost the subtle signals of movement and scent that other mammals used to communicate. In their place came sound. The need to coordinate, to warn, to comfort, pushed the mouth and mind into new roles. Breath became expression. The same vulnerability that once separated humans from nature now drew them together through speech. The pattern echoed again in tool making. The hands, freed by upright posture, replaced what claws could no longer do. Stones were shaped to cut, to scrape, to defend. Bone became blade, and later symbol. The soft-skinned creature that could not tear or bite now built weapons sharper than any tooth. Each tool extended the reach of a body that had been stripped of its natural armor. Even care for the young evolved from this same source. The slow growth of the human infant, its long dependence required cooperation on a scale few animals shared. The inability to survive alone made the group essential. Grandmothers, siblings, and unrelated adults became caregivers. This was not weakness, but the social architecture of endurance, the invention of collective survival. The same structure would later shape symbolic thought. The need to remember what could not be carried in muscle or instinct led to story, art, and ritual. The world that had once threatened now became something to represent and understand. Every drawing, every carving, every pattern painted on a wall was a continuation of the same impulse that first reached for warmth and fire to make what was missing. The pattern did not stop with ancient history. In each age, humanity has found power in its limitations. Fragile bodies became the reason for medicine. Limited perception gave rise to science. The inability to run fast or see far inspired the creation of wheels, lenses, and machines. Weakness opened the path to abstraction, to imagination, to invention. In this light, evolution appears not as a story of perfection, but of compensation. Every loss became a doorway. Every vulnerability revealed a new kind of strength. The skin that could not endure the cold learned to feel. The voice that could not roar learned to sing. The body that could not survive alone built societies that could. The paradox of humanity lies here. Power has never come from being complete, but from knowing what is missing. Nature removed fur, speed, and claws, and in doing so revealed the capacity for thought, cooperation, and creation. The human story is one of constant exchange between what was lost and what was made in return. Across the ages, that same rhythm continues, gain through loss, creation through limitation. Each imperfection became a source of invention, each fragility a reason to connect. The body remained delicate, but the mind grew vast, learning not just to endure the world, but to shape it. Weakness, far from being an end, was the foundation of possibility, the quiet engine of everything that made humanity human. Every freckle, every scar, is a fossil of lived conditions. When a person stands before a mirror, they see far more than a face. The reflection looking back is a living archive. Weather, diet, ancestry, culture, all layered into surface. The light that strikes the glass returns from skin shaped by the sun, by wind, by hunger, and by time. Beneath that image lies motion, the slow and silent continuity of evolution still at work. Each contour holds memory, the curve of a brow, the tilt of a nose, the line where hair meets skin, all formed through generations that endured and adapted. The bones beneath the surface are ancient scaffolds. The soft tissue above them tells a newer story, molded by climate, by touch, by the passage of days. What stares back from the mirror is not a frozen image, but a conversation between past and present. Look closer, and the skin reveals its own archive. Pores mark the sites of sweat and breath. Fine hairs glint in the light, quiet survivors of a coat that once covered the entire body. A faint scar, a birthmark, a line near the eyes, each is evidence of contact with the world. Every mark is a trace of living history, written in texture rather than ink. The skin is a landscape of time. Its surface folds and stretches, gathers light, and bears the imprints of weather and emotion. Wrinkles follow the paths of expression, where laughter and grief have left their faint signatures. Tiny ridges on fingertips hold the same patterns that guided ancestors who shaped stone or thread. Even the hairline carries echoes of ancient inheritance, a soft horizon where biology meets identity. The mirror does not simply reflect a person's form, it reflects the continuity of a species. What appears as individuality is built from the shared material of humanity, the same cells, the same genes, the same long dialogue with the environment. Each reflection is unique, yet all are variations on one enduring design. In that awareness lies a quiet wonder. The gaze that meets itself is the same awareness that once studied stars in firelight, that once traced animal tracks across the savannah. The eyes that see are built from the same molecules that once faced the wind. To recognize oneself is to witness the long arc of life folding inward. The mirror shows not perfection, but persistence. Scars, pores, freckles, and lines. These are the fossils of the living, proof that the story of adaptation continues. The reflection is not a final form, but a moment within motion, a pause in the ongoing experiment of being. That archive is part of the answer to why the species is naked and why the species is human. In every reflection, the body remembers its origins and its becoming. What looks back is both ancestor and descendant, both memory and continuation, the face of a creature still learning what it means to exist in its own skin. When the first light of morning touches human skin, it meets something no other creature carries quite the same way. Smooth, exposed, unhidden, the surface of the body tells of a long passage through time. It remembers forests left behind, plains crossed beneath the sun, and nights spent beneath the glow of flame. The question that began so long ago still lingers quietly. Why are we the only ones without fur? The answer is not found in a single cause or moment, but in the slow rhythm of adaptation. It lives in the way the body and mind learn to shape one another. The loss of fur was not just a shift in temperature or in defense. It was the beginning of a dialogue between vulnerability and imagination, between exposure and understanding. To be bare was to feel everything, to live within the world rather than apart from it. Without its coat, the body became an instrument of perception. Wind and sunlight, cold and comfort, all pressed against it and taught it awareness. The skin became a translator, turning sensation into knowledge. Every touch, every breath of air became part of a growing intelligence, one that learned to respond, to anticipate, to shape the environment rather than merely survive within it. From that exposure, invention emerged. The same hands that once reached for shade learned to build. The same spark that came from friction became a steady flame. Around firelight, early humans gathered and began to speak, to share, to imagine. Weakness turned outward and found strength in community. The bare body, needing warmth and safety, inspired creation of tools, of shelter, of language. Each act of making became an extension of the skin, a layer of protection built not from fur but from thought. As survival deepened into society, the open body became a symbol of connection. Skin met skin, and through that contact came empathy. The warmth of another body became reassurance. The shared pulse of life created trust. Nakedness, once a sign of fragility, became a way to recognize what was shared, the awareness of being seen, of being part of something greater than the self. In that awareness, art was born. The human form, carved and painted for tens of thousands of years, became a reflection of both strength and tenderness. Artists traced the shape of flesh, not to glorify perfection, but to honor the truth of being alive. The exposed figure became a vessel for memory, a testament to the balance between body and mind, between creation and need. Over time, this pattern continued. The skin that once needed warmth gave rise to firelight and storytelling. The body that could not run as fast learned to plan, to build, to imagine. The same species that once huddled for safety beneath the cold sky would one day raise cities of stone and glass. What began as adaptation became identity. Perhaps evolution did not expose the species to punish it, but to awaken it. Nakedness demanded invention, and from invention came language, shelter, and art. It taught the species to protect not just itself, but one another. In that choice, what began as exposure became the first light of humanity. We lost our fur, and in doing so, we found our fire.